Hello, everyone. How are you? How are you doing this evening? I hope you are in good standing, and I hope you are ready to join me with my guest tonight, Leighton Levy. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. We're going to be talking about his legacy. We're going to be talking about what's happening with our track and field, a little bit about the trials that is coming up. So welcome each and everyone. It is Tuesday, not Thursday. It is Tuesday. Welcome to another night of track and field chat on HP Chat Track with your girl HP. And wherever you're coming from, whether it's Africa, Europe, Asia, Antarctica, Oceanic, North America, South America, wherever you are coming from, welcome to another night of track and field. And it is track and field business. Welcome, welcome, wherever you're coming from. And don't go anywhere. Stay right there and we will be right back. Stay right there. Don't go anywhere. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Jamaica's track and field legacy is unmatched. It is a story of triumph, resilience, and extraordinary talent. But do you know the stories behind the athletes who brought us glory? Hi, I'm HP, founder of HP Chat Track. My mission is simple: to celebrate the rich legacy of Jamaica track and field and shine a light on the incredible people who make it happen. Winning that race was a dream come true, but the journey wasn't easy. It's not just about medals, it's about inspiring the next generation. Jamaica track and field isn't just a sport, it's our pride, our culture, our heart. Every week I sit down with athletes, coaches and fans to bring you stories of dedication, passion and legacy. Plus, we've got exciting news and exclusive insights into the world of track and field. Make your Thursday night be at HP's place. Come hang out with us at HP Chat Track Studio, where track and field is our business. Jamaica. One people, one legacy.
Track and field chat, we say yes indeed, yes indeed. Ah, we are back. Yes, we are back with you. Leighton, I'm getting a little feedback from your background.
I think that's probably just traffic. I
Oh,
have no
just
control.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. No problem, no problem. Welcome, Leighton. How are you? Leighton
Uh,
Levy, welcome.
Welcome. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, it's been a good day. I mean, it's my day off, but still a lot of stuff that was going on today that I had to take care of. But it's been a productive day, and I'm here with you now to talk about my favorite subject, track and
Oh,
field.
track and field indeed. And of course, we're going to talk about you a little bit, your legacy. We're going to talk a little bit about, what's happening with our track and field athletes moving on and stuff, and the trials that is coming up this weekend, the national championship. But before we get into the real juice of things, yeah, the traffic is kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, it's kind of, but nonetheless, we're going to get this. Nonetheless, we're going to get this done. But Leighton, before we get into the real deal and the excitement and all the things that is happening, I just want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, Leighton, where you're from, which parish you're from, the school attended, just a little bit about your early childhood.
Okay. So I grew up in a little town called Albertown in Trelawney. My parents were both teachers. My mom was the vice principal of Albertown High School. I attended Sacred Heart Academy in Christiana, for those who are familiar with Manchester, and then matriculated to the Carteret College. Then transferred from the Carteret College to Knox College and went to Knox Com College. And then I worked for a few years at a video store in Montego Bay. And then I went to CAST, which now people know as UTech, where I studied for a couple of years chemical technology, and then Gilbert struck. And in that interim, I discovered indirectly what I wanted to do and ended up at the Gleaner. Um,
Wow.
that's a quick summation of, because there's a lot more nuances to it, because I actually worked at NCB Model for a while as well. But the reality is that I had a friend called Karen Kelly, And when I was at class, I was in the bookshop, part of the bookshop crew. Anybody who went to class in that era in the 1980s knows about that crew. And she said to me one day, she said Shira, because people call me Shira. It's a nickname I had since high school. And she said to me, Shira, you always talking about sports, which is something that I've always done. From I even as a child, I used to wake up in the middle of the night and literally score test matches between the West Indies and Australia, West Indies and Pakistan, West Indies and India, and I'd have those scores packed up and piled up for years. Somehow I lost that folder. I don't know where it is now, but it
Wow.
has a record of virtually everything I used to do. And I used to follow a lot of track and field. You know, Donald Quarry used to be racing almost weekly against Steve Williams, the Steve Riddicks, Houston Martyrs in the United States. And while we didn't have live coverage back in the day, there were reports in the newspaper, the Daily News, and of course the Gleaner that I had access to. And unlike the kids these days, I actually read the newspapers, the sports pages cover to cover. And
Did you play any sport though? Did you play any form of sport?
yeah, I played football, I played table tennis, I played badminton, I played cricket, I ran track. I ran at champs in 81 and 82. I ran at intercollege champs in 83. I played football under 16 from my high school at Knox. I played cricket for Knox. I played cricket at Cast. I
Wow.
played table tennis at high school, and no, I didn't play cat, but I played table tennis in high school and badminton in high school. We played tournaments at badminton hut in Mandeville. I used to play a lot of sports, but then injuries took their toll eventually, and then kind of gave that up because I had a hip injury issue that whenever I came off a curb, invariably my hip would pop. And after a while, I just said, it's better I be on the sidelines and try to manage. In fact, ended up managing a club that a lot of Jamaicans my age would know about called the Boats of Lightning.
I
That
know
were
that
the,
club.
they were the first club in Jamaica to go under 40 seconds in the 4x1. And that was a club that had John Mayer, McFarlane, which was called Beefhead, um, Clarkey, Wayne Watson, and Michael Rivers. And there are a lot of people who they claim to the Boss of Lightning. Those were the original members and the only members of Boss of Lightning. And of course, a young guy called Jason Shelton from Prairie as well, who ran 10-4 back in uh, private school champs. I think it was like 90, 89, 90, I think it was. But he was a member. And those were the only six guys who were part of that team. There are a lot of people who came along later who came to the Bulls of Lightning, but that they were never part of that club, that setup, because that was a specific time for a specific team. It wasn't the cast club or the UTEC club or whatever it was not.
Wasn't that club out of UTEC though? Cast at the time.
Yeah, man, it was cast. It was cast club. A 4x4 team called the Comets, and the 4x1 team was called the Bulls of Lightning that we got by chance. Because when we were designing in late 1987, when we were designing the kit, Paul Ricketts, everybody knows him as Stuffy, he's in charge of the gym at UTEC now. In designing the kit, he had a lightning bolt across the chest and labeled it Bolt of Lightning when they sent it to Art and Fabric for the design to be made into reality. When we went to pick the kit up, the the people at Art and Fabric actually printed the word Bolt of Lightning atop the lightning bolt. That's how we got the name. So and it stuck. And of course, the team was really fast and was really good. And we had a nice stint until the guys migrated to the United States. Most of them migrated in '89 to New York and Alabama subsequently.
So
And
how did that transition took place from you being an athlete into you being a journalist? Was it a dream of yours or it just happened?
it's happened by chance. I was at UTEC doing chemical technology, which I had absolutely no interest in. I was trying to appease my parents. And you know, every parent wants you to be in the sciences. You want to be a doctor. You want to be a pilot, whatever it is. And I had no thinking about journalism, absolutely not at all. When I was working at NCB Manual, for example, in fact, even before that, I used to write stuff in primary and prep school and just make stuff up in terms of my imagination of what Donald Corey would have been doing against whatever athlete. But it never became an idea for me to become a professional journalist until I went to the Gleaner. I applied for the job at the sports desk. A guy called David Edwards was the assistant editor at the time to Tony Becker. And when I applied for the job, I didn't hear from the Gleaner for a few weeks, several weeks actually. I was on my way back to Montego Bay when I stopped by the administration department at CAST, UTEC now. And there was a telegram there from the Gleaner. That's how old I am.
A what?
Telegram. A
A telegram?
telegram. And it said that can you come for a job interview? And it was, I think it was like July something. And then when we did I went and did the interview along with a guy called Howard Campbell. And back then, getting into the Gleaner was a lot more difficult than it was now. First of all, you had to sit on a panel interview with me. It was Dr. Stokes, who was the editor in chief, Wavelin Gager, Paulette Williams, Tony Becker, and I'm trying to remember if it was, and there was somebody else. I'm trying to remember who it is now. It will come to me eventually. So they did a panel interview, then they sent you out on mock to do stories. They sent it to events, and you had to write stories from those events and present them as if they were going to be published. So Howard Campbell and I had similar scores. So Dr. Stokes called us into a meeting together to explain that they had one opening on the news desk and one on, well, they had an opening on the sports desk, and the two of us had similar scores. And he said, we can only take one of you on the sports desk. And I put my hand up and said, if I take a job on the news desk, could I still write sports? And he said, sure. And that's why I ended up at the Gleaner. And then what happened then is that I ended up covering crime for the Gleaner for years. And then eventually the Star, Crime and Court, and did my fair share of that before I was promoted to a news editor in 1995. Was at the Gleaner along with Claire Grant, who was up to recently the vice
She was
deputy
the
CEO at TVJ. Right,
RGR group,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, Idea Group. And then I left the Gleaner in 2004, October 2004, to become the founding editor of what is now known as JNN, Jamaican News Network, that's now owned by TVJ. And I apologize for the noise for the listeners. I live next to a main road and it's crazy when the traffic passes by.
That's okay.
Uh, so what happened is that so I took that job, and the entrepreneurs who were behind that clearly misled us with what they had in place. So we were there for a few months, and eventually we had to part ways. And I ended up a few months later going to Saint Martin to be managing editor for a newspaper called the Today. No longer exists. It was destroyed in 2017 with the hurricanes, the Irma, I think, that passed through that era and destroyed the newspaper. But I was editor there for about 3 years before I came back to Jamaica and started my own sports talk show on News Talk at UWI. The following year, I moved it to Nationwide Radio, and it was there until just earlier this year. I think the show is winding up now for them to produce something new there.
Wow, you were destined, man, to
Yeah,
be
it
in
seems that way.
journalism. Yes.
Yeah.
But what was the real inspiration behind you becoming a sports journalist? Was it were you inspired by someone else, or what happened? How did that inspiration happen?
Look, when I joined the Gleaner, as I said, always wanted to do sports, but it was an opportunity for me to be in the space to be able to do sports. So even while doing sports, I used to write occasional stories for the Star. I remember one year when Glenn Mills' Racers Track Club was going up against our Bolts of Lightning. The Racers Track Club had John Muir, who had gone to them by then, Raymond Stewart, Andrew Smith. I can't remember who the third one was, but it was a big matchup
A big team.
for, yeah, it was a big team for, I think it was Gibson Relays, I think it was. And I wrote a piece about a war between the boats of landing and, of course, the Racers Track Club. And then there's actually cussed me out and saying that they're not in any war, but, but that's good. But the thing about it is that during that time, it was when I began to understand why this has become a passion for me. As I said before, I used to read up a lot about sports. I knew about GC Foster long before GC Foster College became a thing. I knew about Herb McKinley and Arthur Wins and all of these things. I used to read books on Pele cover to cover. You read about Eusebio cover to cover. I knew about De Stefano, all of these guys from the back before I was even 10 years old. I knew a lot about sports that was happening all around the world from way back when. Right? I knew about Linda Remigino and Herb McKinley. I read about so many different sports people in different sports. Alberto Wantarino, so it was something that it was so natural. I didn't see it as something I'd become a professional at because it was just a natural part of who I was. So when I was at the Gleaner writing sports, I used to dabble in it. But then back in 1993, that was 3 years after I joined the Gleaner sent me on an assignment to Atlanta, Georgia, because they had just been awarded the Olympic Games for 1996. And during that trip, in the first few days of that trip, they had us at the Atlanta Dome, and so we had a panel of people who we could interview, including Gladys Knight and Olga Corbett, who was
Wow.
a gymnast from 1974 Olympics, I think it was 72 Olympics, sorry, um, and David Justice and Lee Haney, who I was a big fan of because Lee Haney during that period had broken Arnold Schwarzenegger's records of 7 Olympic Mr. Universe titles, not Mr. Universe, yeah, or Mr. Olympia titles in a row. Lee Haney made it 8 in a row. And I actually got a chance to interview him. And I wrote that story and sent it back to him. And it was published on the front page of the sports page. I'll never forget that. It was my first major global sports story. And that for me was a huge thing because then I was convinced at the time that I could actually do this job.
Mhm.
However, my responsibilities as a news editor at the time was completely different. So because by the time I came back to Jamaica, I did another year doing court, and then I was promoted in 1995 to news editor of the Star, and so I was had complete responsibility for the Star. That then took away the opportunities for me to go out and cover sports. So when I followed that train and moved and basically I said went to JNN, went to St. Martin. And when I was in St. Martin, well, after I got fed up with the resistance of the owner to do the things that I needed to get done there, I said, when I was my wife at the time, well, she was my wife at the time, but she was living with me in St. Martin. She had come from Jamaica to live with me in St. Martin. And I said to her, I'm going back to Jamaica. I'm going to start a sports talk show. And she was 100% behind the idea. We came back, we pitched the show to a couple of people. New Stock took it up first. And then I had another idea as well, where I wanted to do a TV show called Spring Factory. And I shot that around to, I can't tell you how many people we had, how many meetings, but they did not have the vision that I
Yes.
had
Yeah.
because I saw what was going to happen in 2008 at the Olympic Games. I remember having a conversation with, um, what's that company called again? There was a cell phone company that came in and they were competing with Digicel.
Yes.
Um,
I know who you're talking.
yeah,
What's the
I
name?
remember meeting with Mr. Brady and I was telling him about
Claro is the name.
the
Claro.
Claro, right?
Claro.
Because I was hoping that they'll be able to be title sponsors for Spring Factory. I'd actually shot a pilot already with Ramon McKenzie, who used to run for Calabar High School, and I had Juliet Cuthbert and some other people who were doing, a nice little package. And he said to me, when I told him what was going to happen in Beijing in 2008, he said, how do you know this? And I said, sir, I've been tracking athletes all my life, and I've seen what is happening. I see what we're going to be able to do, and this show would be a precursor to that. We went to Jamaica National, went to, I can't tell you how many people we went to. Nobody bought into the idea. And then Beijing blew up, and the rest is history. But it tells you, and one of the things that I've always said, that we're not sports fans in Jamaica, we're wagonists,
Yes.
because then everybody jumped on board after Boats and Sherian and Million, and everybody did what they had to do in Beijing in 2008. But I saw that coming from 2 years before that. So during the radio show, I had a lot of fulfillment. I remember back when the first year at Newstalk was a complete wreck for me. I'd never done broadcast anything before. and it was nerve wracking. And the hour felt like 3 hours. And but after a while, you got used to the idea of it. You got more comfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
by the time I moved over to Nationwide back in 2010, March 15th, actually 2010. Um, my very first guest was Justin Gatlin. He had he was about to come back to the sport after a lengthy ban
Mm-hmm.
for the doping violations, and I had him on. The show was an hour long. I had him for the first half an hour, pre-recorded him the day before, just to make sure there were no slip-ups on the show in terms of connections or anything. And I remember the feedback on the show on the following week. I can't remember, but we had big stars like Ben Johnson on the show talking about his book Soul to Soul, and it was at the time considered the fastest growing sports talk show in the country. And then a lot of things changed. Prefuse at the time thought it was best to put Raga Shanti on the station in my time slot and move me down to into 7 o'clock in the night where I was competing against the nightly news and everything, and then the show began
Mm-hmm.
to struggle. So, but the thing about it is that that was when 2010, when I went to Nationwide, was when I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I had no doubt in my mind because I was able to get global stars on local radio that I had never heard before from anyone. And there were lots of sports talk shows in this country. When I got Justin Gatlin, the phone lines at Nationwide lit up like a Christmas tree. People are calling me and asking me how I got him. I actually got, I was trying to, let me tell you how ambitious I was at the time. I actually sent an email to Barcelona trying to get Lionel Messi on the show, and they
Wow.
emailed me back to say that Lionel doesn't speak any English, so it would be difficult for him to do the interview. But
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of big interviews on that show in the first year, and it was really successful. And it was kind of disappointing that my time slot changed because
That's true.
had it not changed, I believe that it would still be on. I'd still be probably the biggest show in the world because one of the things that I was able to do, I have been able to do during the course of my career, is I had developed a network where I could almost get to any global star I wanted to, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in, because I tell people, I went to school with Darman Bailey, for example, who is 95 world champion, 96 Olympic champion, two friends to this day. Um, through my links at Cast, I met a lot of famous athletes, Roger Kingdom, a lot of American stars, track stars at the time as well, and Caribbean people. So it was relatively easy for me to send an email or make a phone call to get somebody on my show that I never heard on any other radio station in Jamaica, which is what one of the reasons what made my show what it was, and it
And
was
that
doing quite well.
and that's the important thing, networking is, some people don't understand how important networking is very important. But let me ask you something, Leighton. Who was the first Jamaican sports journalist that caught your attention, that you stopped and listened to? You like their style, you like what they were doing, in journalism. Who was your first Jamaican sports journalist that clicked for you?
Probably Hugh Croskill, as I used to read Tony Becker a lot. In fact, I used to buy the Daily News on a daily basis to read the sports stories in the Daily News. And Hugh Croskill was somebody who had everything that you wanted to be as a journalist, not just a sports journalist, a journalist full stop. His delivery was fantastic. He clearly understood the subjects that he was. One of the things that I find that is challenging nowadays, and I use this to explain what I'm going to say next. When you're doing an interview, the essential part of making that interview interesting is doing the research. If you're not knowing about the people you're interviewing,
Yes,
you're not asking the right questions, and you're not able to counter things or follow up on things that
true.
are mentioned in the interview.
Hmm.
So what I was impressed with Hugh Croskill is the fact that he seemed to know everything about everybody who he interviewed. And it's not just for sports, because I remember he was one of the founding members of Nationwide as well. And when he interviewed someone, you knew that when he asked a question, he had information to back everything up that he was asking. And so that became a part of. And to be honest, research was always a part of my life anyway.
Yeah.
Right? I used to go to the library and read encyclopedia and botanicals and particular subjects and spend hours there making notes and taking home and reading over those notes. And then going back to the library next day or buying a magazine and reading the Gold magazine. That's why I got involved with Liverpool. Because I used to buy a Gold magazine and read about everything about Kenny Dalglish and Kevin Keegan and Steve Highway and the Hanson brothers. And to this day, I'm still a Liverpool fan. This is from 1974. So I've been doing it since I was 9 years old, or before that, of reading and making notes about the athletes that I like to find more about. And it was almost like everything in sport I was interested in. It wasn't like a particular era, like football or cricket or track and field or anything. And you come to my house now, you'll see on the shelf behind me and on the shelf in front of me, there are tons of sports books. There's a cricket book that by Arnold Bertram that's over 1,000 pages long. There are many books behind me and other things about Usain Bolt and Jamaican Olympians, Herb McKinley, Arthur Wint. You name it, they're in my house, and there's things that I've read through from cover to cover. And of course, now with the advent of internet, I've been able to research. There's sometimes in the night I can't sleep, and I will go onto a page and read ad nauseum about anything that struck my interest in that particular moment about sports and politics as well, and some other things as well. But that's how you prepare, and
Yeah.
what I got from you, Crosskill, the preparation to do interviews. I remember it was just a few years ago. I did another interview with Justin Gatlin on a little thing we had created for the Olympics in 2021 called On Point. I think you can still find the videos on YouTube. And I interviewed Justin Gatlin, and I can tell you this now. I did not do a single bit of research before I spoke to Justin Gatlin on that. And if you look at the comments beneath it, you will see people say, "Boy, you're well researched." Everything about Justin Gatlin I did, I already had in my head. So
Yes.
when I interviewed him, and that, of course, as you know, when you watch a sporting event, those things stay with you. You always remember the first time you saw, like when I saw Usain Bolt run 9:76 at the National Stadium, and then many people thought the clock was wrong. you know, um, I think we had just come back to Jamaica at the time. I think it was the Jamaica International Invitational
Jamaica
that year.
Invitational, it
Yeah,
was. Yeah.
that was me that year, and people were looking at the clock in shock. And what went on to I run 9:93 as I came to New York, and then ran 9.72. I set the world record for the first time before I lowered it later on the year to 9.69. A lot of these things you don't even do the research on because you've seen
Already
them,
know. Yeah.
and they're in your system, they're in your brain, they're part of what you do on a daily basis. Of course, you still have to do your research because when I interview people on wherever now, I do a lot of research, I do a lot of reading, I make a lot of notes. And when I go in, I'm well prepared for those interviews. So that's always part of the dynamic. But that inspiration came from Hugh Croskill in terms of what he was able to do and demonstrate on radio for me.
Wow, awesome. Hold that thought. Before we go any further, welcome guys. Just a chat here, getting to know Leighton Levy a little bit more. Of course, a sports journalist, not just track and field, but a sports journalist. And of course, my next question to him is going to be his first assignment, for him to tell us a little bit about his first assignment as a sports journalist. And
Uh,
before we get there, welcome each and every one. I am seeing some people here already. We have Margaret Bell, welcome. She's saying hi. Tony P, welcome. DJ Rudy is also here, welcome. Monica Lewis is here. Olympian, 1988 Olympian, Jamaican Olympian, Vivienne Spence Morano. Leighton, I bet you don't know that name.
no, you assume I don't know that name. Of course I know Vivian Spencer. Ask her if she knows me.
I'm just pulling your leg. I'm just pulling your leg. But yes, we have our Olympians in the building. But tell me, Leighton, you have been a journalist for more than 30 years when I do the maths and when
Mhm.
I did my reading. Which assignment, sport assignment, was your first, and how were you able to navigate that space?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. My interview with Lee Haney, eight-time Mr. Olympia. That was my literally my first
Oh, that was
international. That was the first sports interview I actually did. That was the first time I actually sat in front of someone, asked them questions for a story that I was about to write. It was
how
it was
nervous were you?
I was very nervous because I'd never done this before in terms of putting together a sports story. And of course, Lee Haney is somebody I always admired. I used to buy muscle magazines all the time and read a lot about what he did and his workout regimen, the things that he did, the fact that he was eight-time Mr. Olympia, breaking Arnold Schwarzenegger's record of seven straight Mr. Olympia titles. And what it was for me, it was as quickly as I managed to get rid of the nerves because he was a really cool guy to talk to, very down to earth. You would never know that he was a big bodybuilding global star. I just I tapped into the knowledge that I already had of him, and he was very impressed about that, the fact that I knew so much about him. So when I asked him questions and I was making my notes, because I didn't have a recorder with me at the time, because I was not when you're green in the reporting world, you're not quite sure of the tools that you need before you actually find yourself in that situation where you say, "Oh, I didn't have that particular tool." So I had to end up. That's how my handwriting became complete crap. My wife and son laugh all the time that I write like a doctor and they can't read my handwriting. But that's how it all began because I had to be writing really really fast. So I started to shorten words and and depend on my memory at the time to finish those words because he was talking and I didn't want to pause him to break the flow of the conversation.
Yeah.
Subsequently I went out and bought a recorder after that. But he was really cool and it was so fulfilling for me. Back in the day we had a little computer called a Tandy where you had to it's a very old looking computer. It looks like a typewriter with a small screen. I had to plug it into a phone line and then type the story and then press send and hopefully it will transmit to the newsroom. And so when I finished the story, I was so nervous about sending it because you don't want your editors to say, "Boy, what kind of rubbish is that?" so, so I sent the story, and I remember calling the Gleaner one day while in Atlanta to find out. I told him I had a couple of stories coming. I interviewed a couple of other people, including Gladys Knight and some other people. And they said, "Your story is published in the Gleaner." And I said, "Put it up for me. I don't want to leave." I remember when I got back to Jamaica, I must have read that story about 100 times. It was a one column story, but it was on the front page of the Leader Sports page. I remember reading that story over and over and over again and thinking, I wrote that. It was ridiculous because that was my first venture as a sports journalist. I was really fulfilling to see that manifest. Over the years, though, I was never because I really got into sports reporting in full back when I just came back to Jamaica because before then it was a sporadic thing. Most of my work was done in crime reporting or court reporting, and I already had a solid handle on that. But to do sports reporting, the first time that I was actually able to do it was when I came back to Jamaica in 2008 and was freelancing for the Gleaner. And because I had my networks already established, well, let me go back a little bit. Before I left after I left Jamaica News Network, I was trying to decide where I was going to go next. And in the interim, I was writing freelance for the Gleaner, and I ended up interviewing Asafa Powell. In fact, I got my timelines wrong. Actually, I interviewed Asafa Powell first in 2002, while I was still news editor of the Star. My friend at UTech told me that Darvan Powell's younger brother was at UTech and if I wanted to interview him. So he arranged it for me and actually did that story. And that was before anybody knew what Safa Polo was. In 2003, he got to Paris and fall started in the
And
semifinals,
he
of
was
course.
disqualified.
Yeah, and then
Mhm.
went to 2004 Athens and got to the final before he did what he did there. But yes, but after I came back to Jamaica in 2008, I was doing a lot more one-on-one interviews with people who I knew, athletes who I could get in touch with, and sending stories to the leader. So I'd interview a lot of track and field athletes. I'd interview a lot of athletes from different sports in general because I already had established relationships with them from even before I left Jamaica. So now I was able to be on my own as a freelancer and choose what I wanted to report on. So I would find these stories. I would submit, I don't know, 4 or 5 stories a week to the Gleaner about interviews, and they all got published because, in fairness, I think they're all interesting stories. I'm not just saying that because I'm writing them, but I thought one of the things that drives me in terms of how I decide to write stories, I usually ask myself questions about why is this that I'm not seeing a particular story about this particular athlete or what this athlete is doing, that kind of stuff.
And
And
I'm
then
going to ask you about
I
that.
feel like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about the storytelling, as it relates to our track and field. And I'm glad that you said that, Leighton, because as it relates to storytelling, in your opinion, what are some of the important stories that we're not telling enough or we're not telling any at all? I have some of my own, but I want to hear yours first.
Um, Everything actually. I think what we tend to end up doing in Jamaica a lot is reporting on events and reporting on things that are happening. But there are a lot of people who say that we're not doing enough investigative reporting, but not understanding what investigative reporting is. Investigative reporting is a very expensive venture. Not very many people can afford to do that individually, and most newspapers don't have that kind of budget. But in the meantime, there are many stories that can be told. For example, for many, many years, Jamaica's football has struggled. We were talking about this before we came on here, and nobody actually did a story about why is it that we struggle the way we do. Jamaica has never had a strong grassroots program. We've always depending on high school to develop our footballers, and they go into at the time either the major league or now the Premier League. But there is no the reason why Jamaica's football has struggled a lot is primarily because our grassroots programs almost never exist. Nobody's actually done a story investigating how a grassroots program would work in Jamaica, how the elements that need to come together for that to happen, the partnerships that need to be engaged for that to become a reality. Um, there are stories about, there are a lot of rumors
Can
that
I
go
can
around
I give
about,
can I give you one?
sure,
What about the underdevelopment of our middle and long distance program? I, I haven't heard any stories. I haven't read
true,
any story about that. What about the coaches behind the stars?
yep, yeah,
You
that
know,
too.
another
But
one is athletes' mental health. Have
I've
you
done
heard?
stories. I've done stories on that. In fact, well, on my radio show, I've done interviews about the mental side of things. But one of the things that I find about Jamaica and the Jamaican audience is that they think that when you're talking about an athlete's mental state, that you're somehow indicating that the athlete is not mentally is like mad or something. I remember having a conversation with a couple of coaches one year when we were doing the Olympics. I think it was at Nationwide. I was lead broadcaster on the broadcast, and I remember saying that one of the reasons why U.S. athletes tend to get the better of us is that their mental space is a lot more prepared than ours. And a lot of our athletes go into these events not thinking that they're going to win, but hoping that they're not going to lose. And there's a different mindset. And the reality is, I think Usain Bolt actually changed that when he won in Beijing in 2008. Because I remember talking to Million Walker about that, and she said when Usain Bolt won, it gave them a sense of belief in that camp that they've never had before. And those are things that I think there can be more reporting on in this country. The problem is there an audience for it? Because we've done stories of a similar ilk, and people barely pay attention to it. Why? Because all the Jamaican sports fans, I use that term very loosely, care about is outcomes. and not anything else. All they want to know is who won. They don't care why they won. They don't care anything about that. Now, I think what is happening in the last few years, especially, is that a lot of the fans are becoming more aware now that there are other elements that are contributing to why athletes win and why they lose, and so it's a little bit more receptive now. But I think a large part of why things like that don't happen is that, first of all, the journalists are not thinking along those lines because they're thinking about appeasing an audience that are interested only in outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so they feed that narrative. And secondly, the reality is that not very many people are interested in anything but the outcomes. So you're trapped in the sense that journalism is about, well, media is about giving the people what they want in many ways because that's how you attract attention, that's how you grow an audience. And I think a lot of our journalists fall susceptible to the idea that they can't do anything else or they won't be recognized. What I like now is that people like Keanu Rayner, people like Andrea Lowe, people like myself are showing that there is more to outcomes than, you know, more to report on the outcomes than the outcomes. There are stories behind the outcomes. We've done, when you look at what Kean, for example, has done, when you look at what Andre Lowe has done, and in many instances myself, we tend to think about the sports, regardless of whether it's track and field or not. We think about it beyond the outcome. We look about what leads up to the outcome. So we talk to the athletes and we try to get a sense of them from how do you approach a particular event? What's your thinking? How's the training going? Are you injured? How do you overcome certain mental obstacles or physical challenges as you prepare for competition? So we're seeing a lot more of those stories now in football as well, and in table tennis and some other sports, but not as much as these the major sports. And I use that term again because we're speaking specifically about Jamaica. So we're seeing more of that happening now. And we're trying more and more to get behind the story, the news behind the stories, because one of the first things that Calvin ever taught me, Calvin used to be one of my editors at Gleaner, is that journalism is about the who, what, where, when, and how. But there are not many people who are interested. Well, there are not many, let me rephrase that. The real stories are the whys of why things happen. So when I go on an assignment, I used to go on assignments. My first thinking is, yeah, we already know the outcome, but why did it happen the way it did?
I like
But
that.
so there's a particular challenge that we have though with some of our athletes is that when you ask them the why, they get offended.
Maybe
They get
they don't
offended.
know. Maybe they don't know, Leighton. Maybe they're
Yeah,
not sure.
that's probably true too. But one of the things that I've always said, and being a former sportsman myself, I every time I performed poorly, I knew why. Because you can't just be a tool. You have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. You have to understand how the mechanics work between your drive phase and your acceleration and your speed maintenance, for example, when you're running the 100. You have to understand why it's important for you to come out of the blocks at the right angle to generate the necessary force to get you to maximum velocity by the time you end your drive phase to transition into acceleration. If you don't understand those things, you'll never be able to master it. And that's what we see with a lot of our athletes, is why they don't progress, because the reality is that one of the things that annoys me the most is when you talk to a lot of high school kids and they will say, "Sir, I just go there and do what my coach tell me to do." That means you are not engaged in terms of what you're doing,
They
because
don't
you
know
must
how
know
to they don't know
the
how to
art,
put it into words. They don't know
words,
how to
yeah,
put it into words.
which is another challenge as well, because I find it's disturbing
That's
to me.
another story. That's another story
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there.
yeah, because a lot of kids, and it goes back again to communication, because what I found, I said to a friend actually just last night, actually, when I was at Shelly and Fraser Price's thing, is that when you talk to the athletes from the 1960s and 70s and 80s, for the most part, they're mainly pretty articulate. They can tell you a story that you
Yes.
can build on. A lot of these kids from the late 90s into now, not so much. They are not very compelling in telling their own stories. I don't know why. I mean, what I find though is that when they leave and go to college in the United States after a year or two, they can. But when they're here, they struggle tremendously to tell you their own stories.
Hold that
You know,
thought. Hold that
Yeah,
thought, Leighton. You know, you said something very, very important just now because I have interviewed some of these athletes from the late 90s into the 21st century, and they have told a pretty good story. The likes of Aileen Bailey, the likes of Karen Stewart, Melaine Walker,
yeah,
um, Javon Powell, who I just interviewed recently,
me too. Yeah,
you know, Wayne Pinnock, and you mentioned something there, overseas,
yeah,
a collegiate system. And Karen Stewart said it in an interview right here. She said college helped to prepare her in more ways than one for the professional stage.
yeah. Yeah, which is one of the reasons why when I used to hear people on radio talking all the time about kids must forego college because they don't need it because they can't sign a big contract. But if you don't know about how to manage your money, if you
Mhm.
don't know how to communicate, if you don't know how to build your brand,
Yes.
how do you benefit from whatever money you earn? You spend your money, you waste your money. I can tell you many stories about athletes who signed big contracts and are broke now and they're nowhere. Because why? They wasted their money because
They
they
don't know
spent
how
it
to
on.
manage. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. When you look, let me tell you, we talk about Chilean Fraser Price all the time, but people don't understand the level of example that she has set for others to follow. Unfortunately, not very many of them do. Shelley was at UTech when she won her first Olympic title. She graduated from UTech. She used to practice her interview skills with Jeffrey Gordon before while she was at Woolmer's, which is why I know she's one of the best interviewees ever because she's always telling you something engaging, right? Similarly, when you look at the athletes who I remember, there's I won't call any names because I don't want to embarrass anybody,
Yeah, no names.
but no, but when there are a couple of kids that I interviewed here before they went off to college. When they interviewed here, you could do a story that's 250 words long because that was as long as you could get anything tangible out of the story that you were telling. 2 years or 3 years in college, and you call them on the phone, and it's chalk to cheese. They are so much more articulate. Of course, some with accents, but yeah, that's part of the environment, I suppose. But the thing about it is that they're able to now communicate in ways that tell more compelling stories, and it gives you the leeway to tell that story in a more compelling way
But you know
because
something,
then
Leighton?
you have more material to work with.
You know something, Leighton? It is not their fault. And people will say I'm always defending the athletes. I'm not trying to defend. But if we don't teach them, if they are not taught, they're not going to know what to do. Because I have gone in front of a high school and asking some questions, and they're like, I don't know what to say, miss. I don't know
Yeah.
me. So it is not, we cannot blame them totally.
No, we're
The
not.
youth, you know?
We're not blaming them. What I blame are the people around them. Huh?
Yes, yes.
I grew up in a household, and I know I grew up in a different time. There was no social media, there was no TV and radio and newspapers. So I read a lot. So you're familiar with the language, huh? You're familiar with how to form sentences. You're familiar with a vocabulary that can take you beyond the basic, huh? But what is happening these days, a lot of kids don't read. They don't read at all. So they're not familiar with the language, is why they struggle with it.
They just
My
want to
son,
see a short video and that's it.
yeah, yeah, but you don't learn the language from the videos. You
Yeah.
get you get thrown a bunch of information in 25 or 30 seconds, and it doesn't teach you anything. My son is 13 years old, and he's as articulate as they come. You know why? Because as soon as he was old enough to read, this was from he was about 2 years old, we got him into books, and he still reads today. I remember when I went to New Jersey last year, one I bought him back a manga because he reads mangas cover to cover in no time flat. His room is filled with them, and he reads them. And so the use of the language and his comfort with the language is where it needs to be for a 13-year-old. Now, here's the thing: a lot of the parents these days, they are not so much in tune with what their kids are not doing. Right? They think it's more important for them to do whatever it is, except the basic thing. Well, people will tell you, and they'll argue all the time about, you know, English is not a native language in Jamaica. But that's rubbish, right? We're a colony of England. And from 1655 until now, our people were taught to speak the tongue of our colonizers. Okay, English has become the international language of business. If you're going to be able to communicate and build your brand and make a name for yourself, you have to be able to communicate, right? And that's the thing that bothers me because it seems as if nobody's telling these kids that these are the things that are necessary for you to do. And then people complain that when they go in front of a media entity, somebody puts a mic in their face or with a TV camera, they don't know what to say. But if we don't prepare them, of
Yes.
course they're not going to know what to say, right? And the preparation begins with reading. Reading is fundamental. That's not just a phrase; it's a real thing, right? You you hear people talk all the time about how articulate a particular athlete is, but that shouldn't be a surprise. It should be the norm. Huh? When you
True.
talk to a typical British athlete or a typical American athlete, they can communicate in a way in which everybody understands, right? When a Jamaican athlete goes out there and speaks patois, not there's anything wrong with patois, that's a native tongue here. But you can't speak it in an international forum and expect people to understand what you're saying. Because then people lose interest. If they don't understand what you're saying, then you are no story to them. You are something puzzling, something that's not engaging, right? So, we need to understand a lot of these things and understand the basics of why it is that some athletes are able to build a brand and some struggle to. And it's about communication. Building your brand is understanding how to use the language to your benefit. And I think that's one of the things that bothers me a lot about some of our young kids coming up. Because you're in high school, the least you should be able to do is speak the language and communicate a thought
Yes.
effectively without saying, I just listen to our coach. It's not about casting blame on the athletes. It's casting blame on the situation, the system
The
that creates
system.
these athletes. And a lot of schools, a lot of primary prep schools are failing these kids because how can we just saw a story recently where the kids were coming out of they were at Pembroke Hall, I think it was a truck is passing my house.
Yeah, I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it.
Yeah. A truck so there are kids at Pembroke Hall who can't even identify a letter in the alphabet. How can that be?
That's I feel a way because that's where I went to school.
Yeah.
I feel a way about that because that's where I went to school.
Yeah, so it's a systemic problem that needs to be addressed because if you're an athlete and you have immense talent, you should be able to capitalize on that talent from as early as possible. People forget, how when Usain Bolt just came out, he couldn't communicate very well at all, but he at least made the effort to learn how to at least manage and navigate the language, and eventually got better at it. And now, he's all over the world talking to people about his career. You know, um,
Melaine Walker said the
he
same
said,
thing in an interview right here. She said to me when she got to a certain level, she said to herself, microphone is going to come in my face and I have to get it together. I will now have to learn to talk. And what I
mhm,
realize is that a lot of our athletes will tell you that they're not a talker. But when
yeah.
you see them with their peers and their friends,
Mhm.
you know and Melaine said she had to get it together and talk when the media, because the media is going to come. But Leighton, another story that I would like to hear a lot of is life after sports. I don't think we're hearing that story enough. Life
Yeah.
after sport, what
Mhm.
comes after retirement. Those
Yeah,
are some of the stories.
yeah, that's something that I think we can work on a little bit better in Jamaica. The challenge is though the getting someone to ask me to agree to doing those interviews because some of them see it as prying into their lives. And if I ask and they say no, I'm not even going to prod. I'm just going to walk away from it because it's your right. You want to keep your life private. That's your business. So we try to find the athletes who are willing to talk about their careers and talk about life after their careers.
So here's a
And
place to start, Leighton. Here's a place to start. Start with the retired athletes, like what I have done here. start with the retired athletes, get the retired athletes to tell their story. Because I'm going to tell you a little thing that I've been thinking about, that I wanted to write to the Gleaner to ask them if I could get a space to write the story of a retired athlete. So every week I would send them one story, because
Hmm.
I have the stories of a lot of our retired athletes, and I'm in that space now where I talk to them. And I think if we can get our upcoming athletes to read these articles, see what these athletes, retired athletes, have gone through, and what life was after sports, whether they were struggling, whether they had to go back and get a 9 to 5 job, that kind of thing. So when they read these stories, it maybe can inspire them to take a different route or want to tell their story.
If they read those stories, that's a big if, and that's something that we find.
Yeah.
Look, I have written stories about athletes and sent them the link to the story, and they don't even know what's in it. They will look at the headline and say, "Nice story," and then they will mention something that is in the story, but they didn't know it was in the story. So you see, that's a challenge. It's not just about doing the stories. It's and getting people to read the stories,
And
and
teachers and
yeah,
and
yeah,
teachers teachers
yeah,
in teachers in the classroom can get their English class to read these stories and
yeah,
summarize the story. Read the
yeah.
story and write a 500-word summary of the. So find creative ways
Yes.
to get them to.
Mm.
So the teacher would read the story and, okay, bring it to school on a Monday or a Tuesday, whenever, and said, okay, class, this is the assignment. I want you to read this story about, let's say, Vivian Morano,
Mm.
who is here. Read this story about Vivian and write a summary about that story. And just joining us is another Olympian, Dorothy Scott Genius, formerly of Very Technical and
Technical.
right, Jamaican Olympian,
Mm.
1980, 1984. But we have to find a way, Leighton, and this is something I say over and over. We need to help them find creative ways to help them, but we have to do it collectively.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% because if we can get these youngsters to start to understand their own history, the history of the sport that they're involved in, um, and another point, another side to that as well is that I find a lot of these kids don't know much about the history of the sport that they're involved in.
True.
Um, I remember talking to a Vera athlete a few years ago, and I asked them about Aileen Bailey. You just mentioned Aileen Bailey's name. She didn't know who Aileen Bailey was. Aileen Bailey is probably one of the most successful athletes ever to come out of your technical high school. How can you not be teaching your first formers and your second formers the history of the great athletes who walked through the halls of your school? Aileen Bailey, Veronica Campbell Brown, and so on and so forth. So you see, that's one of the things that I admire about Kingston College, where I'm told that they teach a lot of their history about Kingston College athletes in first form at Kingston College. That I think needs to happen more widely across the spectrum of schools. I mean, I'm sure that first formers at Knox right now know nothing or very little about John Jones or Christopher Smith or Paul Melville or any other guys who have gone to champs and won medals for champs. I was on a team in 1981 that finished ninth, but after Casey and Steve were disqualified after that big fight in 81, we were promoted up to seventh because those two schools were disqualified. Paul Melville won class 300 and came second in 200, it was, I think, at the time. Um, and Knox came, I think Knox finished in the top 10 that year with about 24 points. Okay. These are some of the things that you can teach at the high school level about the people who share the same space with you in high school, so that you're knowing that there is a trail that has been blazed, that you can follow that trail.
Yes.
Um, Christopher Smith, for example, he won the sprint double in class three for Knox, and I came back and competed in the double in class one for Knox as well. Um, Christopher Stokes won the 100 in class won at champs. I never forget that race because Leroy Reed was supposed to win that race easily. Pulled up in the middle of the race, threw Gregory Magoo off from St. Diego, and Christos came through and won the 100. And a lot of people don't know as Dr. Christopher Stokes, who is a financial analyst on the news in the nights. All of these things, there are so many Olympians and outstanding athletes around us every day,
Yeah.
and we don't know enough about them. And I think, yeah, we can do more about those stories, about getting the kids to read those stories, because not every platform is visual, right? And not every platform is not even the audio, because if it's not visual, they're not watching it. And that's the unfortunate thing about it, because one of the things about social media, which I think detracts from the or some of the purpose that it could be used in the good for, is that it has weaned these kids off of reading into just seeing 30-second snippets of something
True.
and assuming that that's information. You can't learn too much from that. And it's one of the challenges that journalism faces, in that everybody just wants to see a short video as opposed to taking the time to read and get more context of the information that you're seeing. So that's a challenge that we face as sports journalists as well.
Wow. Every time when I think about our youths and our young people and branding and the importance of image and the fact that they don't know, I keep asking the question, are we failing them?
Yes, we are. There's no doubt about it. We don't teach the history of. Look, let's use a non-sport example. When my son was going to Calabar, and one of those started school years where you have the parents and the teachers, yeah? And the teachers are telling you what they have on the syllabus each year. I remember my son was going into third form at Calabar, and the teachers came up and saying that they're going to teach Christopher Columbus. And I put my hand up and I said, "Which Christopher Columbus are you going to be teaching our kids?" And the teacher said to me, "Why are you asking that question?" I said, are you teaching the Christopher Columbus that discovered a place where everybody was already living? Or are you teaching the Christopher Columbus that was the murderer and the genocidal maniac who killed over 3 million people in the Caribbean? And they looked at me with a blank stare. But you see, we've been fed so many of these
True.
mistruths
Mm-hmm.
and teaching us that they are fact, when we now know a lot more closer to the truth than what is happening and what happened in the past. Because as the conquerors are the ones who get to write history. So Christopher Columbus was no discoverer. You can't discover somewhere where people are already living. And
I learned that when I got older, because when I was going to school, I was taught that he discovered, and
yeah,
if you write anything else, it's incorrect.
yeah,
But when
that's
I
because
got older,
yeah. So and it's similar with sports.
hmm
Um, how many of our young kids know about the accomplishments of Arthur Wint, who, by the way, is more successful as an individual Olympic athlete than Herb McKinley, who's the biggest star from that era.
they
How
don't
many
know.
people?
They
No,
don't
how many
know.
people know that Jordan Roden went into the 52 games as the world record holder for the 400 meters, and he set in 1950, in August 1950. So so when people tell me that Asafa was the first Jamaican world record holder, I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, Marlon Newville actually had the world record for the 400-meter hurdles in the 1970s. So we need to teach our kids these things so
Yeah.
that when they get into the sport, they know they have a platform on which to build. So 50 years from now, we should be teaching our kids about all of these people, including Usain Bolt, because other people these days think that our track and field success started with Usain Bolt. They don't know that Donald Quarry was favored to win the sprint double in '76 in Montreal, right? That when he lost to Hillsley Crawford from Trinidad and Tobago, I broke out into tears because it was on the radio that Donald Quarry lost. I could not wrap my mind around the idea that Donald Quarry could have lost to Hillsley Crawford. But he came back and won the 200, and I felt I should get better about that. You know, we teach our kids about Bill Miller, who won silver in 1968 behind the world record holder. Jim Hines, the first man to break 10 seconds. And of course, that his daughter actually tried to represent Jamaica and came to trials. I think it was 96 and couldn't make the Jamaican team. And went back to the States and made the US team in 96. So these are the things that we're not teaching our kids, because there's so many of these stories. People think that it was just now that our athletes are doing great things. They weren't doing it as frequently as now, but they were doing it. You know, Don Corey won so many Commonwealth games,
Yeah.
for Jamaica. Jacqueline Putin represented well, Elise Hodges represented well. You know, there are so many Jamaicans who have come on before and done so many great things to build
Mm-hmm.
a platform for
Mm-hmm.
our current athletes, and they know nothing about them. So there's no legacy there in terms of understanding what Jamaica track and field represents in Jamaica. So they go and they run and they complain and they do all kind of different things, and that understanding that what they're part of is a bigger story, a
Bigger
story of a
story.
little nation that from 1896 with GC Foster beating the Olympic people who went on to the Olympics and made the Olympic final, running in meets in England, and the English didn't want to make him run for England because he probably was a little bit too dark for them. And the fact that Jamaica didn't have
But
Olympic track.
but look at GC Foster, who made the
Yeah,
qualifying mark for the
yeah,
1908 Olympic Games.
Olympic, yeah,
How
yeah.
many people? How
Know
many
that, yeah,
people know that?
yeah, yeah. Nobody people know that GC Foster brought physiotherapy to Jamaica.
Nobody
So
know that GC Foster was the one that coached Arthur Wynn
so Vince,
to
yep.
win the 1948 games, where Herb McKinley
Okay.
was actually the favorite and unbeaten in that
Yeah,
season.
and so there are a lot of things. There's a lot of history that we're not
There's
teaching
a
our
lot.
kids.
Yeah,
Herb McKinley was the first man in history to run a 400 in under 46 seconds. Right? We don't teach those things.
mm-mm.
Right? And so our kids come into the sport because the environment tells them that they need to get into the sport because of our talents. But they don't understand what
Yeah.
came before them in terms of
Mhm.
the many people, some of them are not even medalists, but they went and represented Jamaica well
Mhm.
in ways in which people don't imagine. I mean, 1960, when we had the was it the British Empire Games here in Jamaica, and then the Commonwealth Games in '66, where Trinidad and Tobago set a world record at National Stadium in Kingston. We are not appreciating a lot of these things to understand how valuable they are to the legacy of what Jamaica's track and field is.
But let
And
me
it
ask you something. Let me ask you something, Leighton. In my time when I was going to school, PE was you go outside and you run around.
yeah,
What is physical education like now in the schools? I don't know if you know, but
some of them
in
is mere theory.
do
It's
they?
theory.
But this is what we need to be teaching
Yeah.
our children. We need to be teaching them about our sports legacy, because two of the things that really put Jamaica on the map is our sports, our
And
athletes,
cricket.
and yeah, and music, sports
Mm,
and our music.
yeah, absolutely. But we're not teaching them that because we don't think it's important. Because somehow, for too many of us, still, sports is just recreation and entertainment, and music similarly.
Well,
And not understanding,
it is
yeah,
a business. It
it's a
is
business
it is a
and it's
business.
a strong legacy to build upon. Look
Yes.
at what people don't understand this, But you look at what is the United States' biggest export except weapons? It's their culture, Their movies inundate our platforms,
Yeah.
or their music is everywhere, and it influences people across the world. Similarly, reggae does that. Similarly, dancehall does that, but not on the scale of what the United States does. So imagine if we're able to then channel all of that in terms of our culture, embed it into our people, and try to spread it across the world. Jamaica will be that bigger brand now, right? But we don't make the connection, we don't connect the dots and
Yeah.
understand how important these things are. These
Mhm.
four athletes just went to
Hold,
to Turkey the other day.
hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going to get there. We're going there shortly. But before we get there, I just want to ask you. You've covered local, international, and that kind of thing. You've been doing this for a while, almost 30 years in, sports journalism. But let me ask you this: how difficult or easy is it for you to handle different culture at home, abroad? What is that like for you?
Um, Adaptability, I suppose. Not everywhere is Jamaica. Not everywhere is going to be the same. I've had the opportunity to travel to a few countries and understand that things are different where you go. And there's a phrase that you can adapt. I guess when in Rome, do what the Romans do. I mean, as long as it's within your scope of acceptability. The
Yeah.
reality is that you adapt. And when you travel, before you travel, you do research. You try to understand the culture that you're going into. You try to understand the dynamics of the environment in which you're going to be operating and know how to navigate it. It's not that difficult if you're unwilling to learn new things, if you're unwilling to adapt to new environments. You might have a challenge with it, but if you're adaptable, it's not that difficult at all. I mean, when I was going to school in England, for example, an English breakfast was the worst thing you could ever eat for me. But then I realized that there was very little options elsewhere because English food is English food, and so you grit your teeth and you prepare your stomach to take these heavy sausages and you know the things that they eat, and
No
you eat
callaloo
it.
and boiled banana.
No, I wasn't really, I was in Cardiff. I was at the University of Wales. You just had to adapt to the environment and you
Yeah.
function within that environment. So it's about just being adaptable and allow your mind to break free from the trappings of home
Yeah.
while you're not home. Understanding that not everywhere is going to bend backwards. I remember I hear a lot of athletes talk about, but them couldn't eat the food because it's not Jamaican food. But not everywhere is Jamaica.
Yeah.
And there are certain places you go, you'll never be able to get Jamaican food.
Amen.
Um, so you have to be able to you have to be adaptable. You have to learn how to blend into the environment in which you are and learn how to navigate it and succeed at doing it. I mean, it's not going to always be comfortable, but you learn and you adapt. And once you do that, life's a breeze. I've never had a problem adapting to anything really.
I love
When I
that.
was in when I was living in St. Martin, there are certain cultural things that they're not used to. I mean, coming from Jamaica. I mean, for example, St. Martin, when I used to live here, never had a sports culture. When the 2006 Olympics, the World Cup was on, I had to call Jamaica to find people to talk to about the World Cup.
Oh, wow.
Uh, you know, and I remember I remember watching a newscast one night on one of the channels on there, and they said they're talking about a cricket match at Savannah Park, and they were like, "And at Sabina Park," and I'm like, "What? Where is that?" So but during the World Cup, I used to just buy these $20 phone cards and call Jamaica and talk to my friends here about what was going on in the World Cup because you couldn't talk to anybody in St. Martin about it. They had no clue about what was going on.
Clueless, clueless.
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
you balance the truth with protecting your relationship in a tight knitted sport like in Jamaica? How are you able to, balance telling the truth and not hurt relationships? I don't even know if we need to do that, but how are you able to do that?
I think you said the last part of what you just said. I don't think we need to do that. As long as you're fair,
Yes.
as long as you're truthful. Of course, you're going to create enemies. I've lost people. I've lost relationships with people because I've written stories that they didn't like.
Have you ever
But they
been
were like,
blacklisted?
I'm blacklisted right now. Listen,
Wow.
you're going to write things that people are not going to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
But as long as you're fair, as long as you give them fair opportunity to respond, as long as you are aware that it's the truth and you can write the truth without your conscience bothering you, I'm good. You can hate me all you want because you're not the only athlete or you're not the only administrator that I talk to. There are athletes who don't talk to me though, because um, again, I won't call any names, but a
Right.
couple of years ago, I wrote a story about an athlete after having spoken to a coach about why the athlete was not in their camp anymore. And I was told that I was fighting against the athlete. People are asking me about why the athlete was not with the coach. I went and asked the coach, and the coach said, "Coach, explain it." I used the quotes in the story, and people say I'm fighting against the athlete. I didn't say the words. I was only reporting the words that were said to me. You know, I've been blacklisted by organizations because I wrote things or said things on air that they thought was untrue. Not untrue, but unwarranted, I should probably say, because in their minds, I shouldn't be telling the public that they're inept or they're not serving the sport they should sports. That's the way they should.
Yeah.
Um, and they don't talk to you anymore. They're blacklisted. They take you off their mailing list. But
I know.
yeah, but do I care? No. I mean, because as I said to people all the time, you are not the only athlete or the organization that I cover. I cover so many. For every person that has blacklisted me, there are 100 more people who I can talk to or
Yeah.
interview. So
Once
I
you're
don't care.
doing things within, within your rights, I don't see why we have to tiptoe around.
No, if I have to tiptoe around you, I'm not going to be talking to you. I have no interest. There's a particular athlete right now who, when that athlete was coming up, that athlete was so receptive to me talking to them and getting an interview. Now that they're up there, they can't get a word in. Oh, not doing any interviews. I can't talk to the media right now. I don't care. I remember at the Racers Grand Prix, somebody asked me if I'm going to interview a particular athlete. I said, of the list of athletes I have on my notepad right now, that athlete is never on it. And they said, wow. And I said, yeah, but why would I waste my time trying to talk to somebody who doesn't want to talk to me?
Yeah.
I have no interest in that. You
Yeah.
know, I one of the things that I've always said and I always believe and will believe until the day I die, there is no athlete bigger than the sport because the athletes come and go, the sport is still there. And for as long as the sport is still there are new athletes to talk to, there are more interesting people to interview, there are
Yeah.
more interesting stories to tell. So blacklist me. I don't care. I don't. There's water off my back. I don't lose any sleep over it and at all.
But you know what is interesting? And we're going to segue now into Turkey because I have all in the game is asking, are you both looking forward to the Jamaican, aka Turkish national? So we're going to talk about that, but you know, sometimes the athletes don't realize that we are doing them a favor because visibility in this day and age, in this era, is very, very important to their brands. Visibility is very, very
Mm.
important. But we're going to move along. But before we get to this hot topic, I just want to ask another question. As a journalist, Leighton, you've been doing this for a while, and I've been following you for a while. And I've seen you around, and never talked to you until last year when we met, when I introduced myself
Yeah.
officially and stuff. But what do you want your legacy to be as it relates to preserving and protecting Jamaica's track and field legacy? I know that you've done other sports, but we're sticking with track and field. What do you want your legacy to be as it relates to that?
That my legacy, the legacy I want to leave behind is that I told a lot of the stories that needed to have been told, and to give voice to athletes who normally wouldn't have had a voice.
Yeah,
Um, there, which things which will segue to the Turkish
yeah,
situation. When I just started my radio show, when I was at Nationwide in 2010, if you talk to Travis Michael, you talk to Julian Robinson, their coach, you talk to Frederick Bakers, you talk to all of the big throwers who were coming through at that time, Jason Morgan. I was one of the few people who were interviewing field event athletes. Everybody wanted to talk to the sprinters. I remember one time when Frederick Bakers just came back from Barcelona, the world under what is now the world under 20 championship, the world junior championship at the time, where he won gold and he threw 69 meters to win gold. I had him and Travis Michael and Julian Robinson on my radio show in the studio for like half the show, telling their stories. I remember Frederick Bakers saying when he went over to the discus area, because of how slim he was, they said, "Look, the 100 is over here," because they thought he was a Jamaican sprinter.
yeah. He was very slim at that time. Yeah,
Yeah, right. And he said to me that, yeah, so he said he just threw 69 meters. I showed him that, hey, I'm actually a thrower here. And he won the gold medal the year before he won the world under
the world,
18 champ,
right?
under
The
18
world
title as
youth,
well.
the
Yeah, it
world
was
youth.
world youth at the time. You
Mhm.
know, so I get to tell those stories
Keep telling them,
about,
Leighton.
yeah, and Jason Morgan, when he was throwing, you know, all over the United States, and nobody was paying him any attention. I remember I spoke to one year he was left off the Jamaican team. I'm trying to remember what championship it was, and he was left off the Jamaican team. And I asked Dr. Blake about why is it that he was left off, and he threw 68 meters somewhere. And I think it was in Mississippi. I think it was, and Dr. Blake said, but he doesn't throw well when he's throwing for Jamaica. And I'm like, yeah, but he's met the qualifying standard though. You know,
Yeah.
what I think a lot, and it's one of the things that I have a problem with some of these administrators. Throwing inside a stadium is different from throwing outside of a stadium. When you're throwing inside a stadium, the wind factor in your throw will limit how far you can throw the discus. When you're throwing in an open field, it's a different thing altogether. When Nicholas Arm set the world record earlier this year, it was an open field that he threw it, and Rashford Mullins threw that meter and threw 69 meters as well, right? So you have to understand the dynamic of why throwers will throw far at some venues and not far in like inside of a stadium. And that for me was very hurtful. And it wasn't me. It was just that Jason Morgan was training hard to make a national team, met the standard, came to trials, won a trials, and they tell him that he's not good enough. Yeah,
I
that was and
remember.
that was always the approach to throwers and field eventers in Jamaica. And I think it's one of the reasons why we've seen four of them now jump ship and go to Turkey.
And
Because
let us segue into that.
yeah,
The
yeah.
big news that have Jamaica trending. When you first heard that news, Leighton, were you surprised?
I broke the story.
When that news first came to you, before you break that news, were you surprised that this was happening?
No, I wasn't, but I was disappointed and I was hurt because I know all four of them very well. And I was hurt. And I was actually hoping that it wasn't true. Because I've known Roger Stone from when I was at San Diego. I knew him when he went to Clemson, I knew when he went to Arkansas. I know Wayne Pinnock. I've known Jim Hibbert. I've known, I met Reginald Campbell. He was on my podcast last year. Um, so my first reaction was a sense of disbelief. I called their agents. Well, I called Wayne's and Jim's agent, and he was in Stockholm. And I tried to get him back, but by then I think Diamond League meet had started, so he wasn't answering his phone. So I had to tap into the other parts of my network, and then I started to confirm bits and pieces. I had a name from Sunday, but it wasn't. Unless I get at least two verifications, I'm not going to
Right,
publish a name.
right. Hmm.
So, so I wrote the story, and when I put it out there, I was hoping that I was wrong and that the sources that I had tapped into were wrong because I found it that half of our Olympic medals from last year were going to be leaving the island because of the very thing that we were just talking about, the feeling like they don't matter to Jamaica at all. And what was very particularly hurtful to me was when you look at the fact that Roger Stoner, what he did, I don't think people understand the gravity of what he accomplished. He became the first discus thrower from this side of the world to win an Olympic gold in the discus. In a distance, a mark that would have won every single Olympic Games from 1896 until now. The first Jamaican to do it as well. I mean, Frederick Dickens got silver in 2019 at the World Championships with silver in the discus. But this was an Olympic gold medal. Came back to Jamaica, got his usual little money from, and I said little, not to be disrespectful, but to put it in comparison. Basically 19,000 US dollars from the JOA, and that was it. No fanfare, nothing other than that. And when I look, I have a friend who called me on Sunday after the story came out, and he was livid. And I understood why his anger was so palpable because I felt similar to that. But one of the things that I've learned as a journalist sometimes is that sometimes You have to walk a mile in another man's shoe to understand his point of view. And if you're living in a space and representing a country that shows you pretty much that I really don't care what you want to accomplish, you will never be anything great to them, and you're not getting paid, and you're not supported in your endeavors to represent the country well, and you feel unwanted to that level, why would you stay? Nurses and doctors do it, teachers do it, engineers do it, pilots do it. So why shouldn't the athletes do it? Yeah, because it's easy for me to say, boy, the man them betrayed Jamaica.
Right.
But in 20 years from now, and these guys are living in squalor, what are you going to do about it to help them? Huh? So we cannot always say that they're betraying Jamaica. I don't think they're betraying Jamaica. I think Jamaica
I don't
betrayed them,
I don't think so either.
right? I think Jamaica betrayed them.
Hmm.
Because if you go out there and represent your country to the very best of your ability and bring home Olympic gold, the pinnacle of all
At
sports,
the highest level.
right? The pinnacle of all sports, and you come home and it's like crickets. Why would I want to be around people who don't respect what I do? You know, so if Turkey came calling and said, yo, I will give you $500,000 to take a Turkish passport. I'll pay you tens of thousands of dollars a month to live on and that you don't have to worry about work. And if you win medals, you get
You get
$500,000. If
money.
you win, you get $300,000. If you get silver, $130,000. If you get bronze. What's to stop me from going? Right? One of the things that I was taught when you're growing up is that what is it, the phrase the stone that the mason throws away
The
becomes the
builder
cornerstone.
refused. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
The Now they become the cornerstone of Turkey's program
Yeah.
because we didn't see the value of them, right?
True.
And there's an argument to be made that Wayne Pinnock and Jane Hewitt both had very healthy contracts with Puma. Okay, but the thing about it is this: those contracts, like most contracts, are temporary. They're on every 4 year cycle. What happens if one of them blows out a knee or hurts a back or has some kind of injury that ends their career prematurely? What then do they do? Because Jamaica certainly doesn't care. So what are they going to do? Go find a work somewhere and bat around until, the thing about it is that people have to take care of their best interests. And while loyalty is important, and in the minds of many people paramount, the reality is that economics is the order of the day because when a man retires from any profession, he wants to ensure that he has the wherewithal to live comfortably and take care of his family and take care of his needs. If he gets ill, he can go to the hospital and not worry about paying the bill. If he needs to pay a mortgage, that
That's
he doesn't have to worry about not doing that. So we can always, for those of us who are angry, try to understand that this is the job that the athletes do. This is what they do for a living. This is why I get annoyed when I tell people, when I hear people say that you and Blake must hang up in spikes. No, you're not
yes.
paying his bills,
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
right? So what right do you have to tell someone they must hang up? Because what? Because you're not willing to satisfy your need for entertainment because the athlete does well? No, he's doing this because this is what he gets paid to do for a living. So if you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be following the sport because this is what the athletes do. They're
Yes.
not just there for your entertainment. I remember something like Hubert Lawrence and I had a wonderful conversation about that one night. And he says Jamaican track and field fans are extremely ungrateful because they see the athletes as only there to entertain them. And the minute you're not entertaining them, you're worthless, right? And that's the behavior that we demonstrate time and time again. And you hear people say the athletes workless and the athletes not good and they must pack it up now. They're not doing this for you. They're doing it to pay their bills. They're doing it to feather their nests. So what is it's the appreciation of what they do that I think is the lacking of the understanding of that. Why a lot of people are angry. Right? I hear the Prime Minister last night saying that he's thankful that Shelley is loyal to Jamaica, and that's wonderful because Shelley's always been loyal to Jamaica.
Wow.
But if Shelley wasn't
But
it,
does it mean that these athletes are not loyal? Sport is
I
a
don't.
business.
It's
Sport
a
is a
business,
business. It is a
you know.
career.
I don't think it means that they're disloyal. It just means that they're looking out for themselves. Um, and if they're looking out for themselves, make them disloyal, then you're going to characterize that that's your problem. I
No, but
don't see it as being
we have
disloyal.
okay, all right. If if that's what some people are saying, all the other people who are citizens around the world and live in another country
Mm,
and government minister who decide to move on to another big job somewhere in another country, does that mean that they're not loyal to Jamaica?
exactly, because it's a job like any other job.
It is
Look,
a job that you're doing. It is a job.
look how many nurses leave and go to the United States
Look how many
and go to the
teachers.
our teachers. Does that make them disloyal? No, they're looking out for their
No,
best interest. They have families to take care of, their bills to pay.
I
They
hear
have a
I
life to
hear
live.
I hear people say it's not the same, and I shake my head and I said, "Wow,
How is it not the same?
how is it not the same? It is the same thing." But you know something, Leighton? Um, I think it was over the weekend. The J3 put out a press release saying that they have not received any formal document as it relates or requesting any transfers. And I'm saying this is a process. So how could the J3A not know this even before the story hit the media?
Well, as the way I understand the process is that Turkey had to complete the paperwork first. And athletes had to get their passports, and that those documents weren't in place yet. They're not for all of the athletes. Subsequently, this week we've learned that the World Athletics has received the formal request from Turkey for the transfer of athletes to Turkey from Jamaica. That communication, I think, will subsequently made to the J3As. So I think it's just a matter of the time and where we are along the process about, the J3As getting the communication from World Athletics about the request being made by Turkey that they want these four guys. So that's what I
Okay.
think. Mm,
So it's from Turkey to World Athletics to the J3.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I
because
was
that's my understanding of it. Because what we understand is that the World Athletics Review Committee has to look at the documents, look at the requests, and determine whether or not these requests are acceptable, and then the process moves on from there.
So is it a done deal or
No, it's not done yet. I mean, based on the reports that came out earlier this week, is that the the documents are not yet under review from World Athletics.
so they have not switched?
Not
But
yet, but
but
the process has begun.
can it be overturned?
I suspect that it can be. I think if Jamaica decides to put up resistance, I think they might present a problem. But I don't think, based on what Garcia said, I don't think they're going to put any resistance to it
But on,
because
on what grounds though would they try to overturn it?
that's a quick question. How do you stop an athlete wanting to go somewhere else because you're not treating them right? I mean,
But
Rajinder Cameron was on a podcast just a couple of days ago outlining all the things that he said made the decision to transfer easy.
yes,
You know,
and
so
I totally agree with him. I totally
yeah, I
agree
mean,
with him.
if nobody, if people show you what they are and who they are and how they feel about you, it's like a relationship. If you have a
Yes,
girlfriend or a boyfriend and your other is not paying any attention,
you go
you'll
look for
find
somebody
that,
else.
yeah, you'll find where love is. So
Simple,
they
simple.
don't feel the love here, so they're going elsewhere. And while it's hurtful, to be honest, because these are young kids who would have probably gone to the world championships in Tokyo and win more medals. But for them, it's more than just medals; it's life,
Yes.
and we have to put that into context.
Hmm. Agree. But let us go back into history a little bit, Leighton. This athlete switching allegiance to compete for other country is nothing new. We can go as far back as the 70s,
Hmm.
where we had athletes in the 70s competed for Jamaica at the Olympic Games. And then by the next Olympic Games, they're competing for Canada. You know,
Hmm.
we had it in the 80s and the 90s, all the way into the 21st century.
Yeah,
We had a group of guys that switched. We had the Brandon Simpson, the Andrew Fisher, the Jack Harvey,
yeah,
all those
Kimberly Brown.
Kemarley Brown, all those people switching, Merlin Otti switching in the early 2000. We had, well, Inga Miller. I wouldn't say she switched, but
No, she was trying to mention it,
right,
yeah. And
right.
Sandra Farmer Patrick as well. Mm.
Sandra Farmer Patrick, Yvonne Saunders, who is here with us, Olympian Yvonne Saunders, who switched. She competed for Jamaica 1970 at the 1972 games.
Hmm.
1976, she was competing for Canada. She too has a story on why, she switched. So this is not new. So why is there a fuss?
This time, I think it's two things. One, the number of athletes and the potential of the athletes.
Caliber of athletes.
Yeah. Um, you look at Jaden Hibbert, two-time World Under 20 champion, who, with a torn meniscus, just missed out on a medal in the Olympics in Paris last year. You're looking at the reigning Olympic gold medalist in the discus. You're looking at the reigning Olympic shot put bronze medalist. You're looking at the reigning Olympic silver medalist in the long jump. So it's not like these guys were 29 and 30. Well, Roger Drake's 29. But you're looking at athletes who are the current medal winners for Jamaica.
Hmm.
Remember, Jamaica won 6 medals in Paris last year. These guys won three of those 6 medals,
Yeah.
including the only gold medal from Paris last year. That's who we're losing. And as I tell you, we are wagonists because if these guys were not medalists, I don't think there'd be any noise, right?
There you
But
go.
they are medalists, so we are losing value. All of a sudden now the value becomes more important to us, who normally would not pay these athletes a time, give these athletes a time of day. You know, we have this very peculiar way of looking at our athletes, as if to say they are commodities that we can pick up and throw away as we choose. Not understand that these athletes are human beings that have needs like every single one of us. They're not
Hmm.
machines. They're not things you pick up in the store and use and throw in the garbage bin afterwards.
Yeah.
And so, so what we're seeing now is the idea of losing potentially 3 medals, possibly. In fact, I would venture to say losing 4 medals from the
For
World
me.
Championships coming up in this year, because I'm thinking that a healthy Jaden Hibbert is going to be medaling, you know. So, and that's the disappointing thing for me with him, is that we never got a chance to see him compete at his best for Jamaica at the senior level.
True.
Because he's won 2 World Under 20 titles, so we know that he'll be able to do that. He owns the World Under 20 record at 70 meters 54. Um, he owns the NCAA record at 70 meters 87. Had he jumped that last year, he would have been in the silver medal position, I think, because 18 meters and a little bit one. So that's what we're losing. And I think in losing that, people are recognizing the value of what we're losing, which is why you're getting the noise now.
Wow, I tell you, it is amazing how we look at things, because we are the same people who are saying sport is a business, sport is a career, and the athlete should approach it as such. But
Hmm.
now that they are doing it, we're having a problem.
Issues with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're having
Yeah.
issues. We're calling it sellout. We're calling it all kind of things. But the thing is that I have said to close friends that the conversation that we should be having right now is not that athletes have switched. The conversation that we should be having is, how do we curb this? What kind of system are we going to put in place as it relates to athletes' welfare, training facility, training programs, incentives. What are we going to put in place now to give our athletes an opportunity to choose us first?
Well, I had a conversation with Mr. Greens last night, but she was saying that, well, that's our last night at the Shady and the price. And she said, so you don't think we're doing anything? I said, no, I never said that. What I said is that we are not doing enough, right?
Right,
Because the athletes insurance scheme, I think, is a brilliant scheme. Huh? That's something that the athletes have. But if you're not injured or you're not in need of medical services, that insurance scheme is not really beneficial to you. I said to her last night, and I said again today, what needs to happen is that needs to be a collaboration between the JOA, the J3As, the private sector, and government. And
right,
they find a common ground and create a structure around helping the athletes finding ways to create revenue on a sustainable basis. That revenue is then distributed to athletes as needed. Because when you represent the country, you're a brand ambassador. You should be paid for that because there's value for that. And I don't care what people want to say about whatever it is. You put on the national colors to represent Jamaica. You are a brand ambassador, and you should. There is value to that. It's the reason why NIL contracts have become the norm in the NCAA now, because those images are why college athletes, colleges earn, and the NCAA earns money using those athletes' images to earn money. So as a consequence, when the athlete puts on a Jamaican color and gets out there, they are representing the country, and they should be paid some kind of NIL, you know, name, image, and likeness, because that's what people watch for, and they represent the country for that. So what needs to happen is that they need to create a structure, I think, a tiered structure where if you're at a certain level, you get paid X. If you get a higher level, you get X plus one, and at the highest level, you get X plus two. And that way, because look, you will never be able to pay every athlete, okay?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But once you graduate to the level of national representative, then you move into that tier one, tier two, tier three, depending on what you're able to accomplish in
Yeah,
those tiers at international competitions. I think it's very possible. I think I don't think it's unreasonable for the government of Jamaica to put aside a million US every year towards some kind of a unit trust or a stable instrument that turns over a long period of time. You do that for every year for the next 20 years, with a constant turning over of interest that's at 3 to 5%. You have a fund of, say, 45, $50 million US. And then from that, you can, if an athlete is at a national representation level and is requiring of assistance, you can draw down $100,000 a year for that athlete or higher, depending on what is required. And I remember that everybody's going to retire at the same time. So, from a retirement standpoint, once that fund continues to turn over, eventually it becomes hundreds of millions of dollars. You can pay an athlete maybe $30,000 a year as a retirement, as a pension, um, and then afford other structural things like putting in place a proper rehabilitation center that they don't have to pay for, but you can pay the physios out of that fund, like a monthly salary or something like that. But then the athletes can go there and get their massage therapy and stuff like that, and acupuncture, whatever it is, free of cost or at a reduced rate. And of course, you can probably open the facilities to the public, and then those funds are to generate operational costs as well. So there are different things that you can do. I mean, all you have to do is sit down and think about it. I mean, when you look at it, look, people always argue that government can't afford to do this or government can't afford to do that. But government can always afford to do things that they want to do and find the money when they want to do when they want to do it.
yeah,
So the athletes here are in a situation where they are in need of your support. They are in need of your help. Especially those who don't have true contracts. The ones who have true contracts, that's fine. The contract can take care of them. Huh? And but especially for those who don't have contracts, you can create a fund from which you can support them with those contracts, right? It doesn't have to be at the outset. It don't have to be $100,000, but it can be $20,000. You know, and them can probably find them way around for the rest of the money what them need. A little hustle here or there or whatever it is. But at least they're getting that money that will help to have a base for them can work on. So even if things don't work out for them in terms of maybe getting a temporary, some kind of temporary job or something, they know that they have a money in them say, okay, in the bank and say, okay, fine. We can pay my physiotherapist this week. We can pay my coach this week. We can buy some groceries to get me the protein I need to be able to build my body up for do what I need to do. But when you have to be scrounging around and depending on people and pushing your pride in your back pocket to beg people for help, that doesn't help you. It doesn't help your self-esteem. It doesn't help your confidence, and it
Yeah.
literally it degrades your ability to perform well. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you go out there and you have a thing there, and you're under pressure knowing that well I have to make a final because I don't make a final, now I'm
You
dead
don't make
hungry for
a
the next.
contour. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you take away that pressure initially and allow the athlete to perform at their best by taking away some of that pressure. So there are many things that can be done, but for me, ideally, it has to be a partnership with the JOA, the J3As, government, and of course the private sector. Because a lot of these private sector companies, they instead of put out ads whenever the athlete wins something. Congratulations to John Brown for whatever. Instead of putting out that ad, bring the artist in as an ambassador and pay them a salary to be an ambassador. Especially though a lot of our artists are very engaging globally. So they're an ambassador. So they at least have that. And then a little bit of funding from the structure that I just spoke to a while ago.
Yes.
And then, they'll be less inclined to want to leave because at least they're seeing an effort from the stakeholders here that they have their interests at heart. Because sometimes it's not just the money, it's
There you
about
go.
feeling like you are valued.
Yes.
And if you don't feel like you're valued, you're going to leave. I don't care how good you think things are for the athletes. Some of these athletes are literally living hand to mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like back in the 1980s where the Golden League, where athletes used to make a lot of money in the Golden League. The Diamond League has changed that setup altogether where only the elite athletes at the top make all the money. The athletes who are finishing down in the ranks, not making no money. They might fly them in and give them a hotel for 2 nights, and you get a couple of meals, and then you go back home to starvation. So you have to create a structure that the athletes will be able to then have a sustainable source of support that allows them to train without the unnecessary headaches, train without the pressure, and train without the worry. Make their life a little bit more comfortable.
I like your model because the thing is that you and I are thinking the same way, and I'm going to share some information with you. And I heard a part of Rajindra's interview, and he said they were getting a deal that would allow athletes to get um, compensated, and they did
Mm-hmm.
not take it. And with that, he came to the conclusion that look, you guys don't care about us, so I'm going to do it for myself. You just mentioned set up a tiered funding system. That's the number one thing on my list. Establish a transparent athlete support program. Make it very transparent, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
performance, have a performance level and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Another one I have is create an athlete relations unit.
Unit.
We don't have that. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that is one of our big problems. There's no outlet for our athletes to to channel whatever issues they are having.
Yeah, because here's the thing, and going back to that argument in there about Rajindra talking about the contract that is, the contract that he refers to is the Adidas contract
Adidas. Yes.
that came to the
Mhm.
fore last year. That
Yes.
as I was actually talking to somebody last night about that as well. The contract would have could have gone up to as much as $8 million a year, $8 million a year, right? And the J3 decided to sign up for a contract which is less than, well, I don't even think it's half of what that is. Right? I don't know what the numbers are, but The reason why I know it's not as much as that was because when I spoke to Garth Gale at Champs Launch this year, I asked him specifically, directly, is the Puma contract better than the one that was being that made what Adidas made public last year? And he suggested that while everybody thinks it has to be better, we have been, Puma has been loyal to us for so many years. And I'm like, yeah, and so you think if Puma has been loyal to you, that they should be able to take advantage of the fact that you're being loyal to them? Or do you bargain for the best interest of the athletes that you represent? Right? Because look, I don't want people to think I'm not against Puma in at all. I think they've done wonderful work in Jamaica. They've supported a lot of our programs in their high schools and they've supported a lot of our athletes. However, in a world of business, if one person is willing to pay you $5 and another person coming down willing to pay you $40, which is one you're going to take?
$40, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So why wouldn't you take? Because we got the details of the thing. There are incentives there for medals. There are incentives in the contracts for winning relay medals, and in there are contracts there for athlete support. There are incentives in there for facility upgrades. It was everything that we needed. Right? I said I can't speak to the Puma contract. I have no idea what the Puma contract says, but the mere fact that they're unable to do some of these things now for the athletes would suggest that the Puma contract is not what the Adidas contract was offering. I mean, it's a simple extrapolation, right? So if Rajinder saw that, and I'm sure he was not the only person who believes that as well, that you have this opportunity to sign this deal, and then you took a lesser one, it tells you that couple of things. It tells you, one, that you were never in consultation with the athletes about what they need to begin with. And two, you signed that contract in a way to suggest that you don't care about what your athletes need, right? So that's exactly what it was. Because, if you have a deal like that on the table and you somehow find a way to walk away from it, if somebody will give me $100 a year to do what we're doing now, and somebody come along and say, "Here's 1,000," and I said, "No, no, keep your 1,000 because this man has been paying me $100 a year for the last 5 years." That to me makes absolutely no sense.
You don't want your
So
business to grow.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want
You're
your
not,
business to grow. And
no,
another thing I came up with, Leighton, is prioritize athletes' voice in decisions.
mhm,
And that is establishing an athlete's commission. How do you feel about that?
on point because the J3 is, contrary to what some of them believe, are there to represent the best interest of the athletes. They say they're there to govern the sport, but who are you governing if there are no athletes? So you're governing the best interest of the athletes because without the athletes, there's no federation,
I say that
right?
every day. I say
Right.
that every day.
So if you're not doing anything in the best interest of your athletes, who are you working in the best interest of? That's a big question because the athletes are the ones who you should be representing. Just like how you have the Jamaica Teachers Association representing teachers, you have all the different
You
unions
have
representing
WePo.
different.
You have
Yeah,
WePo
we are
representing.
representing the cricketers. The
Mhm,
J3 is supposed to be there to represent the best interest of the athletes, which means that every negotiation, every deal they make, every decision that they make should be done with the mindset that this is in the best interest of the athletes. And clearly, while they might feel that they're doing that, the athletes don't feel the same. And
yes,
that's a big problem.
yes. The athletes are not feeling the love at all, and it's hurtful. It breaks my heart that they are not feeling the love because I'm sure that a lot of our athletes, some of these athletes who are switching, they're switching with a heavy heart.
Of course they are. Not a lot of people running for Turkey, but Turkey is an option, and it might be an uncomfortable option, but it's
Yeah,
one that pays the bills
yeah,
because it's not just listen. These four athletes are not the only athletes who might go in. Word on the ground right now is that depending on what happens at the national championship this weekend, other athletes could opt to move as well, and not just Turkey alone. Because they would see, okay, look, let me go back to the Kamali Brown and Andrew Fisher here. I
yeah,
understand why they would have gone on to Bahrain or wherever they're going. At the time, to make a team was nigh impossible for those guys.
yes.
You had Asafa Paul, you had the same boat, you had Michael Fritz, you had Mr. Carter, you had Nickel
Nick
Ashmead,
Ashby.
you had Kamar Bailey Cole, you had a whole bunch of people, these three people that can select for any one team, right? And then the relay team goes down to six, and they're not in the top six. So why not go somewhere where you can be number one or number two? But now the dynamic is different because the
Yes.
ones that are leaving, the ones that are leaving are the ones that who are the top.
Or the number
And
one, number two, or number
the two
three.
and number three, yeah. And that's a concern.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem that the JSPA seem either, I don't want to say unwilling because I don't want to presume, but they don't seem to have a full grasp of what it is that they're facing right now. They're facing a potential mass exodus of our best athletes to
Mm-hmm.
countries that can't afford to pay them. Like just this evening, the Prime Minister announced, well, last night, the Prime Minister announced that he was instructing the Minister of Sport to engage stakeholders to create an ecosystem that athletes can benefit from. Minister Granger announced that in Parliament this evening that they are going to start that process. I'm interested to know whether or not the suggestion that I made last night is going to come into play, where they are going to probably work more in cohesion with each other to
Mm-hmm.
create this system that would allow the athletes to be able to say, I want to stay and represent Jamaica because Jamaica cares about me. I want to do the things
It's
that I.
it, it's very unfortunate that it has to be a reactive initiative. It should have been a proactive initiative, but
Yep.
it is what it is. The national trials. What do you think the energy is going to be like in another
It's,
2 days at the
it's gonna,
stadium?
I think it's gonna be a little bit dampened by the absence of the four guys. Now that we've understood the value of what they represent, but I think there eventually will be memories are short, huh? And I think if we see some good performances on the track, people are going to start saying, "Oh!" But I'm telling you this: regardless of whoever wins the national championships, these world championships in Tokyo could be one of the worst in recent times for us, and I'll tell you why. The Let's take the sprint hurdles for example. Akira Nugent is our star, and she will most likely win at national championships over Megan Tapper and of course Daniel Williams, who doesn't need to be there because she's the defending champion.
Right.
This year, Jamaica will not have Janik Brown because she's gone AWOL again. They will have Brittany Anderson because she's pregnant. You'll have a few newcomers like Amoy, that's her name.
Amoy
Oni,
Campbell. Amoy
no,
Brown.
Onika, no, Anika Wilson,
Oh, Onika Wilson. Yes.
who runs for Clemson University.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's this other girl, Michaela, something like that. I can't remember. She runs for UTEP, I think. But you're looking at Daniel, Akira,
Megan.
Megan
Yeah.
making the team. But when you look the bigger picture out in the world,
Mm-hmm. It's big.
Grace Stark, Tia
Yes.
Jones,
Oh yes.
Masai Russell,
Yes.
Toby Amerson,
Toby, who is coming back.
yep, the Tajik Ambunji, what's her name, Serena from France. Their hurdles field is ridiculously deep, right? So while Akira might be among the very best in the world, there's no guarantee she'd be on the podium because she could probably very well run a personal best and not make the
True.
podium in
True.
Paris or
True.
in Tokyo, sorry,
True.
right? So let's pick the 100, the women's 100. I'll get to them in a while.
Before you go to the women's 100, somebody's asking what happened to Elaine Thompson Hera. I meant the Olympics So somebody's asking about Elaine. Elaine wasn't registered for the
No,
trial.
she wasn't, and nobody knows really.
Right.
We know she was training in Florida for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know if she's still training. We don't know if she got hurt in training. We know she hasn't run all year.
Yeah.
We don't know. It's a mystery.
Yeah, she went.
She has literally dropped herself off the plan. I know we see pictures of her on her IG page, all dressed up and looking fabulous because
Right,
she's a
but
very
we're not.
attractive. But
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing new to say about whether or not she'll be competing or not.
Right.
Um, so that remains a
Yeah.
situation that remains a
That's
mystery to
what
everyone.
That's one of them that will break my heart. Not seeing her at the trials is breaking my heart already. Not seeing Elaine because I really, really want to see Elaine. Elaine is one of those athletes that I want to see, and the trials haven't started yet, and my heart is already broken. But go back to your prediction. Let's hear your prediction for the 100.
All right, so the 100 women, based on the times that we've seen so far this year, is a wide open affair.
Yeah,
Okay? We've seen Sherika run 11.04. We've seen Shelly run 11.0 something. We've seen Tia Clayton run 10.92. We've seen, no, yeah, Tina Clayton run 10.98. We know that Chris Slowly looks like she's going to run fast this year. Kemba Nelson, there's Shanice Walker who runs to Florida who ran 10.98. So it's, of course, Brenna Williams, ran 11.03 and looking like she's ready to run faster than that because she ran three races in a row last week and 100 heats, 100 finals, and a 200. Ran 11.04, 11.03, and 22.69, which means that she's in shape. So she could come to the trials and ready to run 10.8. But whoever wins trials, I'm assuming that Sherika will not go into a full taper because she's preparing for the world champion. She's already the defending champion for the 200, so she doesn't need to run the
right.
200.
Mm-hmm.
So unless she comes to the trials and runs something like 10.75, will that be enough for her to get on the podium with what we see from Melissa Jefferson and of course Julian Alfred?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I don't see anybody beating Julian Alfred. Right?
You
Melissa
don't you
Jefferson looks
don't
like
think Melissa Jefferson can do it? Can get out there and hold it?
no, not
No?
against Julian, not against Julian Alfred. Julian Alfred right now for me is tapering towards, you're going to taper towards 10.6,
Wow.
right? So, did you see that 10.75 that she ran last week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And as far as I know, she's nowhere close to being tapered yet for Worlds.
Yeah.
Okay? So, if she's at that level now, where she's even backing off at 85 meters and running 10.75, when Eldrick Florial gets her ready for Tokyo, who's going to beat her? Not Nelson Jefferson.
That is going to be. Do you think that race is open? The women's 100 meter. Is it open or not open?
At trials,
No, at
at,
the at Worlds.
at Worlds, at Worlds, I think one spot is up for grabs. I think two places are decided already.
Wow.
All being well.
Who do you give those two places to? Alfred, the gold,
Alfred and Jefferson.
Jefferson. Wow.
And Shakari, if she recovers enough in time, and she has time, because I know she was hurt early in the season. So that's why we really haven't seen her much.
Wow.
But if she comes back to close to our best, she's on the podium as well, possibly. What that means that there'll be no Jamaican on the podium in Paris, depending on what we see at the national championships. Because I do believe that there's Sherika Jackson, who is right now our likely prospect for a medal in the 100, if she decides to run the 100 in Tokyo.
What about Twinny? Twinny looking good all season.
Yeah, but are they going to be willing to run 10.7 and 10.6s?
Too
I
early.
don't. I don't see it yet.
Yeah.
If we see a 10.82 or even a 10.84 at trials, we can say okay, maybe they're in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a 10.9 or anything like that, I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's how I just see it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that's 100. For
Let's
the
go to the
200, for the 200 women, um, Sherika is the defending champion, and I'm hoping well. not hoping. I know Stephen Francis and or the Francis brothers will get her in the best shape possible for to defend her title and to win a third title in a row.
That's a given, right? Nobody
Mhm.
to touch her. Based on what you've
Uh,
seen with
no, no,
Melissa
no,
Jackson at
no.
the time.
Yeah, I'm about to come to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Come on,
But
please.
but but can she run 21-4 again? We don't know. We don't know if, what the injury that she had suffered last year has set her back to the point where she's not able to get to that level again. What I do know is that to get to a medal, she's going to have to go through Julian Alfred, who is much stronger this year. This is why she started this season running 400 indoors, outdoors 300, and stepping down to the 200. And the last two races are 100. So she has the speed and she has the endurance. And remember, she beat Cherka earlier in the season in Florida
Hmm.
over 300 meters. You have Gabby Thomas, who is the reigning Olympic champion. You have Melissa Jefferson,
Who
who is
is the
now
upcoming star?
right cool. And then you have a few. Well, I'm not sold on Dina Archer-Smith just yet because I think Dina's. I'm getting the feeling that Dina's best days are behind her. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but so the possibility is that Sherika Jackson, for her to be on top of the podium in Tokyo, she probably will have to run as fast as she ran in Budapest at 21:41. If she doesn't do that, she might not win the gold medal, or she
Hmm.
might not even medal. So, it's got right now it looks like 21:70 is not good enough for the podium.
That
Right?
200-meter final, I think if Jefferson decides to double, I think they will have to catch her on the straight.
No, she's gonna have to catch Julian on the street. but 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 listen, listen, what listen, I have one of the things that I've known since I started following Julian Alfred when she was here in St. Catherine High in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yeah. And watching her progress to the second fastest woman all time indoors over the 100, over the 200 and the 60 meters, 6.94, 22:01, and running 10:72 in the arena at the Olympics last year, and running 21:88 to open her season in the 200. By the time Eldrick Floreal is done with her and lets her loose in Tokyo, I don't see anybody beating her. That's just me right now. As of this moment, I don't see anybody beating her over the sprint double. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying
Right.
I don't see it happening. So Julian Speed, the way I see things shaping up, when I break that race down, I see Julian and Melissa coming off the curve together, and Julian's superior strength will carry her to the victory. Gabby Thomas can break it up in there somewhere, but because I know Gabby will be ready. Gabby has run 21:6 already. Melissa Jefferson hasn't gone there. Melissa Jefferson just run 21:90. That's the first time she's gone at 22 seconds. So
Right.
that battle, those are the three who I think will be battling for the medals in Tokyo over the 200, assuming everybody comes in healthy and there are no untoward issues.
Wow, very interesting.
But at the trials, I think Sherika, because she doesn't have to run, there are a couple of people who might be running the 200. I'm not quite sure if Dejana Oak is going to run the 200. I doubt it. She could probably run the 400. Um, but the 200 for women in Jamaica this year looks particularly weak because I don't think we have anybody who is other than Sherika Jackson who is capable of doing anything extraordinary.
Hmm.
So the 400 women is going to be one of the races that I want to see.
Where? At
I
the
think
trials or
at the
championship?
trial,
Okay.
both of them actually. But at the trials, they have Dejina Okios, the fastest Jamaican this year at 49:65.
Hmm.
You have Nikisha Price, who is 50.04, who I know is going to run 49 at the trials.
Stay
And then you
tuned.
have Stacey Williams again, and of course Sean Salmon, and I think Antoinette Knight. I think that will be an interesting race to see. I think it's going to come down to Oakley if she can stay fresh, which I think she will based on what she told me that she planned to do. I wrote a story about it last week. Stacey Williams and Nikisha Price. And of course, I think because of those three, we'll have a strong relay team, 4 by
Yes.
4 relay team.
So do you think Antoinette be doubling at the trials?
I think she's going to run the 400 and 400-meter hurdles. I think so. I
Oh,
can't.
both. Okay.
I will check the entries again because I don't remember, but I think so.
Okay.
But
Okay.
even if she doesn't, I think her form over the 400, this 400-meter hurdles this year
Should put her in
suggests,
the relay.
yeah. I mean, and there's Leah Anderson as well. There are a number of young 400-meter runners coming through from college
Mhm.
who I think will be a good from a good squad. On
Yeah.
the men's side, I don't see anybody beating Brian Level over the 200.
Yeah. True.
Based on what we saw at Racers Grand Prix, I think he is the clear favorite to win the 200. I think Christopher Taylor might be in the mix as well. Um,
Will they get the qualifying mark? Do you think they'll get the qualifying mark for the games?
yeah, yeah, man. I think Brian Level is clearly in shape to do that. I
Okay.
think Christopher Taylor. I think Christopher Taylor will get there.
Okay.
Um, the 400s, I'm not quite sure what's happening with that. Antonio Watson doesn't seem to be healthy again this year. I mean, having won the title in Budapest in 2023, he's been hurt since, and I haven't seen him much this season. Um, there are a couple of players there. Haven't seen anything much on DeAndre Watkins or my guy from GC Foster College. I don't know. We'll see. We haven't seen much of Sean Bailey so far this season as well.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm kind of still not quite
Yeah,
sure what to expect
that
from that.
race is wide open.
Yeah.
Open. Yeah.
Right? So, and then of course the men's 100, it's the usual suspects. It's it's Kishan Thompson of Seville, who I hear is training really well. Akeem Blake, Brian Lavelle. I think those are the top four. I think if that's the top four, and they go down to Barbados on July the 5th for the relays for the 4x1,
They
they will
can get.
qualify. They will qualify. I think that team can run 37 at
Will
this point,
my
37.5.
question is, will the top four go to Barbados?
That's the question. And so that depends on the coaches and depends on whether or not they come out of the trials healthy or not. So I'm hoping that if the top four come out and then the J3 selects a team, that's the team that they send to Barbados on July 5th to qualify for the World Championships. And they send that
Mhm.
team and they run well and they don't drop the bat like they do at World Relays. I think they can run 37.4, 37.3 with the speed that's on that team because I think Oblique Seville, I think to me can run 9.6. And I think Christian Thompson can run 9.6 as well. They might not do it at trials, but they'll probably be capable of doing it later on in September. I think Akeem Blake has shown this year that he's ready to battle with them. And I think what we saw from Blind Level at the Grand Slam meeting was it Philly when he ran 10.02
Mhm.
and then came to the stadium and ran 19.79, slightly winded. I
Yeah.
think he'll be in the mix. I'm hoping that Julian Ford can recover from that hamstring injury that he suffered at the World Relays. And a couple of guys coming out of the US college system. Travis Williams, I hope he comes. He's a good relay runner as well. And so that's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be one of the races at the championships. So I think those are the people I think. So if I should now extrapolate to the global stage,
Before you go any further, hold that thought. All in the game is saying Gabby has never run 21.8 outside of Eugene. Melissa Jefferson, if she makes the US 200-meter team, is a dark horse and for a medal, and I think so too.
no, I'm not going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
But Gabby's the Olympic champion, isn't she?
Yeah, but when you look at those Grand Slam races, with her and Melissa Jefferson, it's she
No,
she was blown away.
yeah, but what it tells me is this: they're on two different training cycles. Melissa Jefferson was probably running, you know, on a slight. I wouldn't even call it a slight taper.
Jefferson looks superior, Leighton
Yeah, yeah, she looks up here, but that's April though, or early May,
or May.
right? Yes. What will be a clear indication, I believe, is the U.S. trials at the end of July, right? Let's see what happens at the end of July when they line up for the U.S. Championships. If she wins there, then she's legitimate. If she wins there, then she's legitimate. If Gabby beats her there, then you is what I'm saying. I think Gabby Tola
Gabby can beat her there, and she go to the championship and
can do
beat
better.
Gabby.
Yeah,
So
I'm not saying that. I'm not ruling that out any at all.
yeah.
I'm just saying that Gabby has established herself already at the global level. Melissa hasn't just yet. So I'm not saying she can't do it, but she hasn't made that step just yet. She ran 10.73 in the Grand Slam. She ran 21.9. That's nice. Do it in our where our US trials is going to be
In
in
Eugene,
July,
in
right?
Eugene, yeah,
And then go to
Oregon,
Paris, and then go to Paris where you're
in
racing
Tokyo,
against,
yeah.
yeah, in Tokyo. Sorry, I keep saying Paris. You go to Tokyo and do it, then fine.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying right now, either of them, I don't see them beating Julian Alfred.
Julian for the double.
I think Julian will do double.
Marathon.
I think she'd probably run 21.5 and 10.68 or something like that.
If you were to pick one event in Tokyo to look forward to, which event would that be?
100-meter hurdles women. Because
Wow.
I think the world record could go. And when
Mm.
I say go, I mean it could probably go to something like 11.9.
Stop it. Stop it, Leighton.
What's the world record now? The world record now is 12.12,
12, 12,
right?
12. Yes.
Right? And you remember in Oregon, um, Toby ran 12.06 in the final, was winded though.
Yes, it was. Yes, I
So
remember
far
that.
this year, we've seen Masai run 12.17, we've seen Tia run
Mhm.
12.19. We saw Grace Stark run 12.21 last weekend. We saw Akira run 12.30, right? All of these young ladies are going to be pushing each other.
Yes,
And
yes.
remember that, as I remember before, the Taji Kambunji from Switzerland. And
Hmm.
there's Serena. I can't remember Serena's last name. She's from France. She won the World Indoors a couple of years ago. Um, and there's another artist who I'm forgetting. But we're looking at 6 or 7 women in going to Tokyo who have the possibility of running 12 twos or faster. Because remember now, they're not tapered yet. None of these women are tapered yet. And then they're running 12 twos now when they're starting to taper. Remember now, Grace Stark 12.21, is just outside the previous world record of 12.20, right? And just behind her was Toby Amazon, the world record holder at 12.24. And
Hmm.
just behind her was Akira Newton in 12.30, right? So when you add that and throw in the other Americans and throw in the Europeans, they're possibly will push each other to times that we've never dreamt of seeing. I mean, yeah, it's a stretch to say
Is
11.9,
is it
but
open?
that's
Is it open?
I I
Yeah,
think so.
the hurdles. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because the hurdle is a minefield, huh? And I think depending on who executes the best on the day, we'll talk, which is why I think, given the depth of the quality of the talent there, it's like when Bolt lined up in Berlin in 2009 with Justin Gatlin, no, not Justin Gatlin, it was Tyson Gay,
Tyson
with
Gay.
Safa Powell, right? And then, of course, in London in 2012, when you had the 5 fastest men in history lined up against each other. You had Asafa, you had Tyson Gay, you had Johan Blake, you had Justin Gatlin, and you had Usain Bolt. Remember what that race was?
Yes,
980,
sir.
980 came fourth. 979 was third. That means that no less 979 that he ran in Paris last year would have only put him third in that race. That's how quality that race was.
Yes.
That's how I see the women's 100-meter hurdles. The men's race is not going to be bad either. Because I think what we've seen from Trey Cunningham, what we've seen from Cordell Tinch, what we've seen from our own Rashid
Broadbelt.
Broadbell, right? And there's a youngster coming up. I don't think he's ready for the big time just yet. Jerome Campbell, sorry. Uh, he used to run for Northern Colorado. He's transferring over to Arkansas for the new school year, this his senior year. He's a nice potential former Calabar man. He went to Jason and went to school abroad.
What about the Frenchman, the young Frenchie?
Oh yeah,
Right?
Zaya. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's too. So looking at all of this dynamic in terms of the mentors as well. I
Mhm.
think I think Colonel Tinch And I think Trey Cunningham will make the US team. He's been consistently fast all year.
Yes.
And I'm worried a little bit about Grant Holloway. He's lost his last two races. I don't know if something has gone wrong with him there, but I think he's probably fine. He's used to winning, so winning is a habit. So I think he knows that. And plus, he's the world champion. He doesn't even need to run the team. He doesn't need to run. He's the defending champion. So it will US will more likely have four men in the final,
They will.
and Jamaica will have most likely Rashid
Three.
Broadbent. No,
Who
we
are
won't
the
have three
other
men.
two? Who are the other
Um,
two that would join Rashid
in from Jamaica, I think
from Jamaica?
I'm
Orlando Bennett?
think maybe Orlando and Hansel. I think Hansel still has a big race left in it. I think those three will probably come through. I'm hoping that Tyler Mason finds a way into the team. That guy for me is the epiphany or the
Well,
epitome of bouncing back from adversity. He just missed out on the last two championships, and I think
mhm.
if he gets it right, he could be in there this year. But the trial is going to that race at trial is going to be interesting as well. And I think we'll probably see some good performances in the 800 meters as well. I think Navaski Anderson ran a new national record recently,
Yes.
1:45.61. I
hmm
think him coming in will pull some people to a decent time. I think Navaski probably run 1:44 again. Um, but I think we represent well. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to get to the final in Tokyo because these guys are running 1:43s and 1:42s and 1:41s. But I think the experience will serve him well. And I think they're probably allowed to run faster going forward as well. So, yeah, it's good. But for a broader scale, though, what I was going back to say, with all that said, outside of the relays, and we have to do well in the relays for that to happen, we could just come away from Tokyo with maybe four medals.
Wow.
Yeah, or
Four.
maybe five. When it could have been eight or nine because we just lost four medal prospects there.
No more
Um,
double digits for now.
I don't see it yet. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's true.
after this weekend, I'll have a clearer vision of what might happen. But I mean, for example, Jordan Scott has been jumping really well all year in the triple jump, 17. He's
Yeah.
been consistent over 17 meters. But when he comes up against the Picardos and the others who are jumping over 70 meters regularly, I think he's gonna probably have to be, and what's his name, Fernandez, who now jumps for Spain, I think it is. That guy jumps 17, 80 like regular business. I mean, is Jordan's gonna have to jump somewhere in the region of 17 meters 70 or 1760 to be on the podium. I'm not saying he can't do it,
hmm
but he hasn't done it yet. So it's still up in the air. Um, we lost our best long jumper, so Kerry McLeod is going to have to fill that breach. Kerry had jumped 8 meters 40 already. I think he's going to probably jump in that region to call it to be on the podium in Tokyo. Um, Shanika Ricketts, the triple jump woman, hasn't been particularly outstanding so far this year. There've been no women over 15 meters. So I think she still has a shot at a medal. I think she always is in the mix for a medal.
Yes.
So that's another opportunity. And I think then we have to depend a lot on the relays to get medals
Well,
because
if you can remember at the Olympic Games for the first time in what 20 or 30 years, we did not get one medal
no, no,
at a global championship.
nope.
Not one from Paris.
Yep. So you're looking at a situation where this is like it. Look, if we put our best 4x1 men's team out there, if they qualify, I think they can win it. I think on foot speed alone, if Akeem Blake, Brian Lavelle, who no knows the road curve, Kishan Thompson, and who am I leaving out? Oblique Seville.
Blake Seville.
If they put that team on the field and they're able to get the stick around, I think they have the foot speed to win it.
Who would you put on the back?
Maybe Kishan.
Yeah.
because
I
he
like that.
with his speed he can destroy anybody on the backstretch. The team I would set up would be Akeem Blake to Kishan Thompson to Brian Level to Oblique Seville.
Gold medal.
That that for me runs 37-1 or 37-0 something. If they make the handover efficient, yeah, I think that's possible.
That could be a
Yeah,
possible gold
yeah,
medal.
yeah. So we can hope. The women, boy, I don't know. I don't get that. Depending on what happens at trials, the women are going to have to come good because right now, Great Britain, USA, you know,
Mhm.
Spain, believe
Yes,
it or not, you
Spain.
know,
Talk about
yeah,
Spain. Talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
Spain.
yeah. So the reality is that the women are going to have to be a lot faster than they were at the world relays. If not, they might find themselves.
But Leighton, it's not all speed, it's the understanding the technicality of the relay and
Yeah,
also placing people where they are strongest. I think 2022, 20 and 2023 when we lost the relay, we did not have a good curve runner. The curve runner was not on the curve. So America used Prandini in 2022 in Eugene after we swept the podium and defeated us in the relay. 2023, they used Gabby Thomas, who is a 200-meter on the curve. And again, we lost to them. I think we are still struggling to set up our women's team where the women are strongest. I think we're still
I
not getting that right. We're still not getting that part right.
all right. So let's go back to the Olympics. When was it that Brenna ran the team? Was it 2021? Yes.
2021, right?
Right. You know why we lost that relay?
But we didn't lose that relay. We didn't lose that. We won that relay.
Yeah, yeah, we lost. Yeah, 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 true.
Right.
We lost in
We lost
2022.
right in
Yeah,
Eugene.
I was mixing up the dates. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know why we lost in 2022?
Team never
Is
set up right.
no, Ilian took off too early and had to stop to get the stick.
No, but Leighton,
The
Leighton,
basic principle of relay running is that the stick does not slow down. When Kemba Nelson, I think it was, I don't remember who started.
yeah, it was Kemba, yeah.
Ilian took off too early and had to break to
But
set
you
the
have
stick.
but you have 30 meters, the long zone.
No, the long zone is not an issue. The fact is that you can't slow down to take the stick. You have to wait and take the stick when you're at your maximum velocity because when you slow down, you're literally going down and to start back up again. That way you lose advantages. And that's why it almost happened in Tokyo, right? It almost happened, which is why we didn't break the world record.
So
But
tell me about the curve. Tell me about the curve.
the curve, the curve
Why
is this.
why did
The
we put
principle.
Shelly? Why did we put Shelly against Frandini, who is one of the best curve runner in 200?
It didn't matter really, did it? Because we're always going to be behind. Listen, we need to understand some basic things. If you don't change the stick at the right points of the exchange zone, you're always going to slow the stick down. The France, you remember France back in the 1980s? France had 4 10 speed men and broke the world record. 37-30, I think it was. 37-37. The reason why they were able to do that is that they exchanged the stick at the point when the outgoing runner was achieving maximum velocity. What we have not done in Jamaica for a long time is that we have not practiced enough. So we are guessing and people are running off too early, and people are starting off and running in the stick and having to slow down. That is what costs us fractions of a second. My estimation, I actually timed it in Tokyo, had Elaine waited on Brianna to pass the stick at the time when she should have run off instead of running off too early, we would have broken the world record because we lost half a second on that exchange. And it happens again in Oregon. And if we don't practice it, it's going to happen again because we're not practicing this stick passing enough. It doesn't matter who runs on which leg. I hear people talk about it all the time about you put Sherrick up on the box stretch and whatever. No, it don't make no difference. It's how you
Well,
pass the stick.
I don't know. I don't know if I can agree with that. I think, Leighton, you have to put people. All right, look at a Johan Blake. A Johan Blake will give you his best on a curve. The same with Aileen Bailey. So I would not have Aileen on my relay team and put Aileen on anchor when I know that she is able to give me leverage on the curve. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. You
I
know.
think a lot of people are looking at it wrong. Um, we have to understand the basic principle. The principle of relay running is having the stick not slow down. The minute you have to gauge your speed, you're going to slow the stick down. It don't matter which leg you're upon, it don't matter which leg you want, think is going to somebody who's going to be better on. If you're not efficient with the passing of the stick, when the outgoing athlete is achieving maximum speed coming out of the box, you're going to slow down. And the reason why that happens to us is because we don't practice enough. But the reason why both them used to win all the time is pure foot speed. All of the changes were safe. You know why? Because we had three of the four participants on the planet, and Michael Frater, right? Nestor Carter, 978, Michael Frater, 988, Johan Blake, 969, and Usain Bolt, 9.58. That's why we used to dominate teams because we had the foot speed. But if they were able to get the stick and if we talk to them, they will tell you what they have done is just use safe changes and use them foot speed. If we get the stick changes right, we can be competitive, but they don't practice enough. And there's too much politics. Coaches want them to do this and coach want
Yes,
them to do
the
on that leg
politics.
and
Yeah,
thing and it's all politics. Don't make no sense to me,
the
right?
politics.
But
Yeah.
so but when you look at the teams in 2021 and 2022, I know people don't like to say it because they think I hate her. I don't actually. I like her very much. But Elaine was the person who cost us the gold medal in Oregon because she took off too early both times. Because she gets nervous for whatever reason. She gets nervous. Look, when you listen, you set a marker on the track,
All right. So
and
if we know, so if
the
we
person
know
gets that
that,
move, you start.
so if we know that this is a problem with Elaine, shouldn't we put her then on a leg that will not cause us to have this problem?
Which leg are you gonna put her on? Average start? No.
The
Are you gonna
anchor.
have an
I
anchor?
don't know, anchor.
What's his slap
Will it
weight
be
on the stick?
will it be
But
the
she's still
same thing?
no, if she's panicking, if she's nervous on the back stretch, what's going to happen on the ankle leg?
Try her to start then. Use her to start then. She might just give us a beautiful leg starting. I
Well,
don't know.
maybe that's the opportunity, but then again, you'd switch out her for somebody slower on the back stretch
Put
because they get to,
Sharika on the back. So
yeah, that could work.
from Elaine to Sharika to Brianna to Shelly.
Yeah, that could have worked,
Yeah.
but
Somebody is saying,
that's hindsight. Eh?
yeah, somebody is saying World Relay show that Clayton twins should be leg 2 and 4. Shelly should be leg 1 and Sharika leg 3. Your thoughts on that?
Look, you can set up on the relative any way you want. I hear people saying that Sharika
I
shouldn't
don't
be
believe that,
anchored.
Leighton. I don't believe you can set it up any way. I
No,
don't
no, no.
believe.
Listen, no, listen to
All
what
right,
I'm saying to
all
you.
right, all right. Let me listen. Let me listen.
I agree that you will put relay runners on the legs that if you think they will perform best on. Okay? The Clayton twins, if one of them starts, it's not a bad deal because they're used to running that, right? When we saw them break the world record at the national stadium, the one that wasn't ratified because Darko messed it up,
Mm-hmm.
they look good, didn't they? Right? But then when they went down to the world under 20, when they were down to it was Brianna this time on the third leg, right? So what I'm saying to you, all it comes down to, regardless of where you want to put people, if you don't practice that leg and don't practice that handoff, it will always be the same problem. Because either you're taking off too early or you're taking off too late. Right? So to me, having used to run relay legs all the time, in high school, in college. I remember, but I became fifth at champs to that team with me, Paul Melvin, Gwyn Jones, and Howard McLeish. We became fifth at champs in 81. Why? Because we practiced when we handed off to get the stick off when we were at the maximum speed going on the box. And that's how we managed to stay relevant in the race until superior speed from Camperdown and I think it was Jamaica College got the better of us,
So
in the race.
why are people taking off early if they have markers? What are the markers for?
The markers are for this. When you when you practice, right, you have a
Mm,
sense of how fast an athlete is coming in,
right.
and you can say 10 meters from the start of the changeover zone. I will know. I will start running. I usually set up just outside the changeover zone. So when the person gets to that marker, that's when they start running, right? But what happens sometimes is that the person who is outgoing is paying attention to what's happening in the other lane and seeing a runner looking closer than they should be, and then loses their concentration and takes off, thinking that they need to stay abreast of the team that is probably on the inside or, well, most likely inside, because that's the runner you're most likely seeing. And so leaving the incoming runner now stretching to get to you. So if very by the time you get to the end of the changeovers when you're having to slow down to take the stick and
So they
feeling for the
panic.
stick most. So yeah, so it's about staying focused on what is in your lane alone and not anything else going on because you practice enough to know what's going on. And as a result, you be patient. And when they hit that marker is when you start running and not before. And
Do
that
you,
takes practice. And you
yeah.
don't practice, you'll make those mistakes.
So we need to practice more. Do you think we will get these three relays that we're chasing?
I think so. I think the 4x1 men and the team that they put together is the one that I think they should put together, depending on the top four trials. I think they will qualify and qualify easily. But they have to practice. Which other team was it? The mixed relays was one that didn't
The
qualify
mixed
as well.
the mixed relay, the men's 4x1 and the women 4x4.
But yeah, the women 4x4 should qualify. I think if they put Dijon Oakley, who's an experienced relay runner at Texas and at Georgia, which she just won the title, and you put Nikisha Price.
On the second leg.
I don't. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, but they have a structure at every time, depending on who you're racing
Right.
against.
Walker
And you put Stacey and Williams, who also experienced relay runner at Texas as well,
with Angela
and
Knight.
and Angela Knight. Yeah, and you should qualify. That team can run 321, 323. I don't know, but I should be able to qualify. The mixed relays, though, I don't know. I think it all depends on who you use.
Yeah.
I think Chance, Salmon, and Leah Anderson would make better legs for the women than the last set that we saw. And then final two other guys, DeAndre Watkin and I don't know, somebody else. I don't know. I don't know who's going to be healthy for trials.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The men's 400 is very shaky.
yeah, it's not very. It started looking promising this year, but for
Yeah.
some reason it's not been encouraging since.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reality is that I think we can qualify for all three, but it all depends on who is available, who the coaches make available,
Or who? Yeah. That. There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
and whether or not they can get the practice in to be able to. Because we have the foot speed.
Yeah, we do.
I think.
And that's the
I
thing,
think.
that's the heartbreak, the fact that we have the foot speed and miss out on,
Yeah.
especially those two gold medals, 2022 and 2023, after sweeping the
Yeah.
podium 2022 and winning two
Yeah.
of the medals.
Yeah. And it happened in 2008 as well, when we got 1, 2, 2 and 100, and then Sharon and Karen
Between
had this
Sharon and Karen.
mess up on the backstretch. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's not new to us to follow up relays. But the bottom line is that we have to practice it, and if we don't practice, we're not confident to make these mistakes.
With that said, in wrapping up, Leighton, man, I love this discussion. But let me just ask you some quick questions and we'll play a little game. What is the funniest, unexpected response you've gotten in an interview?
Wow,
If you can remember.
nothing comes to mind right now.
Fine, and that's fine.
Yeah, ask me the next question because
All right, let's go to the next one. If you could interview a Jamaican athlete, past or present, that you've never interviewed, who would it be? And tell me one question that you would ask that person. Maybe you've interviewed them all anyway.
no, I would have loved to have interviewed Arthur Wint because I think he was a very complex individual and a person who was very silently driven by a passion that extends beyond the sport. So I would ask him something like, "What are the things that drives you to success?" Because he was a successful pilot, he was a successful
Yes.
doctor, he was a
Mm-hmm.
success on the track,
Mm-hmm.
and he was constantly giving back to his community.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would be somebody I really love to interview.
Awesome. 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 What story or which story or interview you are proud of the most that you have done?
Well, I've been a part of a few. The one I brought last week Sunday about the four athletes. That's one.
Yeah.
Um, I think the interview, and this is a broadcast interview. The one I did with Justin Gatlin in 2001 on point. Um, there's an interview I did with Shelley back in 2013 when she came back from Moscow
After winning
about
that double.
the treble.
The
She
triple, yes,
was,
the relay,
yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
and she telling me how the fear of poverty and continued the continued memory of people wanting Veronica to replace her continues to drive her.
Yeah,
Um,
that was crazy. Yeah.
yeah. So those three, I think, are the ones that come to mind. I'm sure there are others, but I can't remember what they are right
Yeah.
now. But those
Where
three come to mind.
where can people find your stories, your articles?
My stories are on sportsmax.tv website. It's simple www.sportsmax.tv. The stories are there. A lot of my stories go up early in the morning, like at 4 or 5 o'clock, and so they have some life through the course of the day. But the stories on our website move fast because our team produces stories on a consistent basis. We have a 10-story carousel on the website, and most days we clear that carousel by 3 o'clock in the afternoon with stories from across the Caribbean.
Oh,
And so we are productive, and we keep our readers engaged with new fresh content through the course of the day. So sportsmax.tv, and it's oh, it's right, my computer's on, but it's right there. It's easy to remember. www.sportsmax.tv, and that's where most of my stories are published. All my stories are published because I don't write anybody else right now.
okay, awesome, awesome. I want you to pick one. I'm going to throw some stuff at you and you pick one. Local or international interviews?
International interviews because they're more open and they're more receptive to questions.
Okay. Pre-race prediction or post-race interviews?
Post race interviews because then you can see what unfolds and then use that as context for your questions. And
Wow.
based on the research that you do, you can then ask questions relative to what you know
Mm-hmm.
and how it connected to the performance.
Awesome. I'm learning a lot from you. Live track side or studio analysis?
Well, that's tough. I love trackside. I like studio analysis, but I love trackside as well because there's so much energy there, and you get to talk to people in their rawest moments, and you get to get more the responses are purer, and so you get a more organic response to questions that you might ask.
Notebook or digital recorder?
Depends on where I am. Most times I use my recorder now, but in certain forums I prefer to use my notepad because then you can actually make notes to yourself that become relevant a little bit later on when you're doing interviews.
Indeed. Breaking news or athlete feature story?
Athlete feature stories. Breaking
Press,
news are flashes in the pan. Huh?
yes, yes. Press box or mix zone?
Mixed zone.
Mix zone. Stadium atmosphere or athlete warm up area?
Stadium atmosphere.
Tweet it first or save it for an article?
That's one I'm conflicted on because tweeting it first is always interesting. Like last night
Yeah.
when we tweeted that Shelly Ann was announcing her retirement. And what was the second one again? So,
It's tweeting it first or saving it for an article.
um, saving it for an article for me is more fulfilling
Yeah,
because then you have room to build a narrative and build a story. Tweeting it first, you can only give a snippet
yeah.
without giving the fullness of the story. So breaking it first again is like a flash in the pan, but when you build the story out around it, then you provide better context for your reader.
Track fan first or a journalist first?
Well, I was always a track fan before I became a journalist, so that's easy. Track fans first.
Male or female interview?
Female interviews. It's funny, somebody mentioned it just to me last week that I seem to interview more women than men. And I find because women are a little bit more, they're more interesting to interview
Yeah,
and they're more honest with their feelings. The men tend to be a little bit robotic a lot of times, but women are a little bit more fluid. They're more organic. The candor is better. I
yeah.
find interviewing
All
women.
right then. Tyson Gay or Tory Bowie?
Wow.
Wow.
Turbo is a sad story.
Yeah, very, very, very
But
heartbreaking.
yeah, but I interviewed Tyson Gay and I found him to be quite intriguing and interesting as well. So I'd probably go with Tyson Gay. 'Cause the Turbo story really tears me up.
Yes, it does. Tyson Gay or Carmelita Jetta?
Carmelita Jetta interviewed her twice, and the first time I interviewed her on Sports Nation Live on Nationwide Radio, I got a ton of calls from people saying that they hated her, but after the interview, they ended up
Yes,
liking her.
yes, yeah, yeah. A lot of Jamaicans were standoff, when Carmelita just came on the scene. But after her coming to Jamaica so often for the Jamaica Invitational, she became,
Yeah,
a sweetheart to us. So Carmelita Jetta or Dina Asher Smith?
that's a tough one. I like Dina. Dina is very interesting. She's a live wire, and she's a lot of fun. Not that Carmelita isn't. I'm going with Dina for this one.
Dina Asher Smith or Wally Spearman?
Wallace Spearman has the best story, so I'm going to go with Wallace.
Wally Spearman or Marie Jose Tattoo Smith?
um, Spearman.
Spearman or Muriel Ohori?
Spearman.
Spearman. Spearman or Armand Duplantis?
Probably go with Monday because he's somebody I really like to interview
Yeah.
because his story is really
Seems
compelling.
as if he is a character too.
Yeah, he is.
Yulima Rojas or Catherine Ibarguen?
Morgan.
I know you would say that. I know you would say Catherine.
Yeah, I like Catherine. I mean, I like Julie Barrow, but
Yes,
I used Catherine Morgan came here a few years ago, and there was
I
an
like her.
interpreter. There's an interpreter in the room, and I spoke to her for a few minutes. She's very pleasant,
Yes,
very lovely young lady.
yes.
Um, and I find her engaging.
Yeah. I see that when she used to compete, it's kind of sad. It was a little sad after
Yeah,
she, I don't know, retired or she left, but
yeah.
she was a character.
Yeah, but
She,
I
you know,
love her to death.
yes,
Love her
yeah,
to death.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But with that said, Leighton, it was a pleasure chatting to you tonight. I actually learned a lot from you. So before you go, I normally give my guests an opportunity to ask me one question. So while you think about your question, I just want to wrap up and say thank you guys for being here. Thanks to Africa, Antarctica, Asia, North America, South America. Europe, all seven continents. Thank you for tuning in, and everyone who had their questions. And there's a question for you, Leighton, before you ask me my question.
Hmm.
Someone is saying, how many more athletes is Leighton expecting to transfer to Turkey or wherever after trials?
Based on what we're hearing, it could be about two or three, if not more.
Top, top, top tier.
Good enough.
Wow, wow, wow. All right. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Leighton. You can go shoot me with your question now. Don't make it too hard.
No, I won't make it too hard. My only question to you is simply this:
Mhm.
how fulfilling has it been doing this podcast?
Oh my God. I love this question. I've never gotten this question before and I love it. Leighton, it is like my therapy. It is like therapy, talking to people who have contributed to our legacy, especially the athletes, hearing the athlete story. I mean, I've interviewed so many of them already. I mean, I used to just hear about these athletes growing up and watching them on TV or reading about them. But when I was able to interview people like Miss Vilma Charlton, Grace Jackson, Debbie Byfield, Kathy Rattray, Vivian, Ethelyn Tate, Dorothy
Yeah,
Scott, Lily Hodges, Ruth, Ruth Simpson, William Simpson, all those people, the Melaine Walker, Aileen Bailey, Dwight Thomas, Neil Gardner, so many of them I've done so far. It is fulfilling. It is like my therapy. I look forward to do the research, and then, as you said earlier, I am able to tell them stuff about themselves. So I do my research as broad as I can so that I can let them know that, hey, I know stuff about you from as early as a champ. So it is really, really fulfilling, and it is like therapy for me.
there you go. See, that could make an entire story that I just read.
There you go. And I hope you write that story. I hope you write. And the thing is that this podcast, it is really to celebrate our athletes, just to let them know that, hey, we see you. We've seen what you have done through challenges, through hard times. We've seen what you have done, and we appreciate what you have done. So
Yeah,
this is my therapy, talking to our athletes.
yeah, man, and it's a nice thing to do when you get to be able to tap
Yes,
into their psyche and understand things about them that normally you wouldn't normally understand. Which is one of the reasons why I asked you that question, because that's how I think as well. You
yes,
get to understand people by asking them questions about
hmm,
why they do the things they do, and you
yes,
tend to get a lot more gravitas from the responses because you're asking. Go back to the original thought about why usually generates more interesting answers as opposed to who,
hmm,
what, where, and when.
hmm,
The why gets you the better answers all the time.
yes, indeed, indeed. And I pick up a few pointers from you too that I'm going to steal. That I'm going to steal.
Feel free,
But
because
go ahead, go ahead.
no, man, now that time is fine. I mean, the thing about it is that we learn from each other, we pick up
Yes,
things from each other that
yeah,
make each other better, which is why the interactions like this for me are very fulfilling as well.
yes. And I just want to thank you for taking the time out to be here and to sharing, a little bit about yourself with us. It is, I mean, I've seen you, I've been seeing you for years, but never had the courage to introduce myself. And last year when I saw you, I said, I'm going to do it tonight, and I did, and here we are. So thank you very much for that, for being so receptive and so accommodating and stuff, and continue telling those stories. I really want to hear those stories. And another story too is that we're not hearing about is the Masters League, the Jamaica Masters Athletics. We're not hearing about that. I had two people from the Masters League that were on back to back a few weeks ago, and it was very refreshing hearing about the Masters League that we knew nothing about. Damian
One,
Maxwell, who
mm.
just came back from the World Games winning a bronze medal for Jamaica. So that's another story too that
Yeah, man,
needs to
I've
be
interviewed
highlighted.
I've interviewed Gordon Robinson a number of times. He's an interesting story. Born in England, raised in Jamaica, now lives in the US. And tomorrow I can tip my hand because I think that's I'm interviewing Ian Weekly about why he's running a national championship this weekend. And you can
Hmm.
read that story. You can read that story on the website tomorrow.
I will. I will. I will. I will. I will. Thank you very much, Leighton. Have a good night.
You
Almost
too. And
3 hours, and we will
yeah,
talk.
yeah, man, take it easy, and it's been fun. And of course, to the guys who tune in, thank you for giving us your time as well, because these conversations I think are necessary for us to build on the legacy of what is Jamaica's track and field. So, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope I didn't bore you all to death, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
I would love that. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much, Leighton. Have a great weekend and enjoy the championship. And of course, I'll be following your post and your stories.
All
Have a
right,
good
thank you
one.
so much. Have a good night.
Bye. Hey guys, thank you so much for being here for, another night. A great chat with Leighton Levy, one of Jamaica's outstanding journalists in sport, not just track and field, but all sport. And of course, you can find his stories on Sportsmax, as he said. Thank you very much for being here, guys. The trials will start in another day or two on Thursday. So, we have more to talk about. So, thank you for being here. It's been three hours. 3 hours. Thank you very much for being here. Have a great night. Good night to you, Coach Kino. I see you there. All in the game. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all those questions and information. Thanks to all the Olympians and athletes who turn out. Damian Maxwell, Vivian Morano, Dorothy was there. Tony P, Monica Lewis, DJ Rudy, Tony P, Margaret Bell. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who tuned in tonight and for everyone who will be watching after tonight. Thank you very much. And guys, please, please, let us support our athletes. I know that our hearts are broken because my heart is broken too, but it is a decision that they have to make for them and their family. And we just have to support them because they're not doing anything illegal, they're not doing anything wrong. They are just looking about their legacy. And my question to the powers that be is, how do we move forward? What is the plan to move forward as it relates to training facility, athletes welfare, helping with injuries, mental health support, and all of that? That is my question. So guys, have a good night, a good morning, a good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you very much for tuning in from all over the world. Thank you very much. Have a good night, good morning, good afternoon. Peace.
Jamaica's track and field legacy is unmatched. It is a story of triumph, resilience, and extraordinary talent. But do you know the stories behind the athletes who brought us glory? Hi, I'm HP, founder of HP Chat Track. My mission is simple: to celebrate the rich legacy of Jamaica track and field and shine a light on the incredible people who make it happen. Winning that race was a dream come true, but the journey wasn't easy. It's not just about medals, it's about inspiring the next generation. Jamaica track and field isn't just a sport, it's our pride, our culture, our heart. Every week I sit down with athletes, coaches and fans to bring you stories of dedication, passion and legacy. Plus, we've got exciting news and exclusive insights into the world of track and field. Make your Thursday night be at HP's place. Come hang out with us at HP Chat Track Studio, where track and field is our business. Jamaica. One people, one legacy.